Good
Hi.
morning. How you
Morning.
doing?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I'm all right. I managed to like drop my computer last night and with the headphone and like the headphone port has actually come out the side of the fucking laptop and
oh my
so
God,
that was a bit distressing last night. It was a bit uh I was quite upset.
your Apple?
It's no,
Oh,
it's actually a gaming laptop that I bought off my brother that's really good video editing,
sick
like
graphics card.
powerful, yeah, really powerful graphics card and not, pretty good, but it's just got the audio port hanging out the side, so that was a bit just a a bit of a hit.
That really
I've got to
sucks.
get that repaired. But the headphones works. Talk,
Yeah,
yeah, you seem to be coming
yeah,
out of both
I got
ears, so
you.
that this lead isn't broken, but I would rather the laptop
So
not
you're
be
actually
broken and this
using,
lead be. So I'm
so,
actually using Elnaz's computer right now. I've just set Zoom up on her computer. But yeah, we went out this morning. We went to Victoria Park. I'm teaching her how to skate at the moment, which is really cool. She's really up for learning
mm,
rollerblading. She used to do it in Iran when she was like 8 and skated until she was about 12, and then moved here and didn't carry on, but she's keen to pick it back up and she's got the basics already. So we've just been learning your crossovers and how to stop and kind of swing yourself around into a turn and
how are you
um,
as a teacher? I mean, what do you sort of point towards in terms of like the fundamentals for somebody who's looking to learn, who's an adult?
well, what's really interesting is the language that the language that I've been learning yoga from, and the kind of languages that people use to describe yoga practice to other people, and going into teaching Elna skating, that's there's a real crossover of talking about the body and how to use different parts of the body and translating that to someone that already does a lot of yoga. Elnaz has done a lot of yoga. Her friends will do quite a bit of yoga together. So they have a dialogue around that. So that becomes like a translatable dialogue that you can use and there's a lot of crossover explaining how to move and put weight on one leg or the other and to trust your toe or your heel,
Does
which you
she like relate to the sort of like the idea behind the technique or behind the really fundamental technique? Because in yoga, I suppose you've got the asanas, postures, and it's as much as sort of a psychological kind of practice, embodying this
yeah.
like posture or
Well,
this.
like doing sun salutations where you're interlocking certain moves. I think there's a crossover with how wizard skating has developed. For example, there being these 8 fundamental moves that you could like say are postures or asanas, and how they interlock to create sun salutations or like continuous movements of the body. And so breaking it down into the basics of rollerblading is like building on those interlocking components
Mm.
that are modular. You can take them apart and then put them together again in different ways. So it's like that kind of language is really similar to, I guess, yoga practice and when you're and other practices, I guess, where anything where you're kind of describing physical movement, and I guess that comes from a lot of sport, and maybe not certain sports, but I
What
think
what
it's repetition, isn't it? Things that include a lot of repetition, repetitive movements.
so so Alnaz was affiliated with skating many years ago, as like a lot
Yeah,
of people of our generation were in that 90s wave, but obviously never sort of took it up seriously.
and that's a
What's caught
really
her imagination? Yeah, sorry, you were going to
what
make a point, but what's caught her
no well
now? I mean, what's the
the point that just going out this morning and seeing how many people are rollerblading around Victoria Park at the moment, and
mm.
I've not seen. I mean, in the last year, I've seen more people rollerblading in that park than I have. I've lived in this area for
Probably like a scene
12,
in its
12,
own
13.
right? The Victoria Park and surrounding area inline scene is like a thing in itself, probably.
Yeah, and it's grown in the last year with people needing to do exercise during the pandemic, having been locked away, and maybe dusting off a pair of rollerblades that have been in their cabinet somewhere. As you know, we've seen some amazing memes like the pandemic saved rollerblading and all these sort of things. But there's like, you know, a real
The top of the cabinet with a light on at the top. People have just left their inline skates at the top, right
yeah,
at the top of their cabinets,
yeah,
waiting
yeah,
for the perfect moment.
yeah, right next to the bulb that then just gets flicked on, illuminating them
Oh.
in the cabinet. And yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, I think just generally the excitement of uh, you know, sharing something together. Elna's coming back to your question about why. I think she's really into yoga. She's also really into swimming. A lot of the swimming pools are closed at the moment. It's a great thing to do. I had a set of Solomons with some 80mm frames on them that were in her size. She tried those,
Lucky her.
and yeah,
She got the
yeah,
salary.
really good. She had a really good setup. And then for Christmas, I got her some Next 80mm power slides as a that was my
So
Christmas to
new
her. So
skates
she's got a
now.
new
New
set of
skates.
skates. Yeah.
Okay, so we've moved past. Well, actually, hold on. We did it in a sort of weird way. We got Sally's first, which is sort of turned into the kind of ultimate throwback setup at the moment. A
Yeah.
lot of people are perving over online and throwing photos up of.
Well, there's a little bit of a story with that particular Solomon setup. So it's a set of Feinbergs with some 80mm. I think they're like rollerblade FR UFS 80mm, and that setup I used to get home from Adrian Krasnaut's house, who was a Victoria
Mhm.
Park rollerblader a few years ago, lived in this area. Really,
When
like Dwen, OG, south of France ripper. Um, and yeah, I just been at his house um, with Amy, his wife, and um, yeah, that they had got late, and I needed to get home, and he said take these, and then he moved away. They ended up at the warehouse.
that's
They
when
got
your master plan
absorbed.
concocted.
They
Take
well, they
these. You're
didn't.
like,
I was like, yeah, great. They don't fit me, damn. But they'll get me home. I had to curl my toes up in them, but I used them to get back. Then they got absorbed into the warehouse stuff. That he moved to Ibiza, then to Barcelona, and when I moved out of the warehouse, they turned up again because they'd actually gone missing. When he asked for them back, I couldn't locate them, which
couldn't.
really it if they'd fit me, then that might be more the case. But I really couldn't have skated them any more than that journey home. I mean, they were really small for me, and I'm like a size 10 and they were a 7, so it was like,
Yeah, that's insane that you even got into them just by way of like function to get home.
yeah,
Sounds fucking horrible.
yeah,
Actually
which
hurting
is,
my feet now thinking about it.
there's a whole topic of like ancient Chinese foot binding and squeezing your feet into smaller rollerblades that would be a interesting conversation to get into.
Just
The
to
kind
not
of,
bash.
yeah, or to bash for a certain aesthetic, because
Yeah,
that is like something that I think was very, I mean, there was a certain size skate that was the most aesthetically pleasing when we were growing up. Like maybe there's like a smaller certain like body size ratio of having a certain
yeah,
skate,
like
not
seven,
looking
eight.
too big.
There's a ratio. It kind of looks cool.
Yeah,
You know what it looks like, compact.
yeah. And I think there was a bit of cramming your feet into a skate that
We've all done it.
maybe didn't fit you that great, but it looked
All
great.
done it.
Yeah, and
Still,
this
still
kind of
trying that out now.
And there's like a foot binding. I've definitely sized up recently. I take like a large intuition liner and but that fits fine in the medium 909 shell.
When you find that, I suppose when you find that perfect formula, or you've assembled the right equipment that feels good, there's nothing quite like that. And you know, with all of the skate review videos that are out now, especially when, you know, Joey or Todd from Mushroom do some like skate review stuff and sort of talk about sizing. And I think there was a podcast recently sort of talking about how you know, luxurious certain sizings can feel, and once you've found that size, that perfect size, you can't, it's just it's heaven. But
it is an amazing feeling.
She had Sally's, they were hurting her.
Yeah,
basically.
so no, the Sally's were fine. They were fine, but actually Dwayne, I'd contacted Dwayne to tell him that I'd found them, because so they're now on their way back to Ibiza, basically.
The
Solomon setup, yeah.
Oh, literally.
So yeah. So
right,
they were lost and found, and in the time between telling Dwayne I'd found them and Elnaz saying, actually, let's have a good bash at rollerblading and we go and try these for a bit. And he said, yeah, I'd actually really like them back. So we've got those posted back to Ibiza.
I wonder what the plans are for these Sallies. It's quite amazing how much of a lifespan certain pairs of skates can have, and the transit that they end up doing country to country.
They're going to his friend who wants to start skating again in Ibiza.
So they're the startup skates. These skates are getting people going.
Yeah,
legend skates with just
legendary set of Feinberg 80mm setups that you know, just
the person's just like, who's this Feinberg? What's this Feinberg? Actually, is his name even on the boots? Probably not.
I think it's rubbed off. It might say Berg on one.
Berg. Who's this Berg fella? Berg, Bjorn Berg.
Who's Solomon Berg?
That's really cool. I mean, I've definitely got a few pairs of Sally's locked away for the year 2035 or whatever, and I'll pull them out and dress them up nicely.
There's Elnaz.
What's up, Elnaz? How you doing?
I can't hear you, but I'm okay.
We're talking about your skate journey.
We're just talking about you, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
It's
skate journey so far.
I only did that once. And I was a teenager. Okay, I'm going to leave you.
Peace. Peace.
Peace.
So is that something?
Bring your breakfast in? No.
I'll have it after.
That's ambitious.
Thank you.
You're going to be spitting all over your camera. Just food, egg, and cauliflower.
Yeah, I've got some. Yeah, got some peanut butter banana toast waiting for me.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
a bit of honey.
Make me a bit jealous, actually. We're gonna have to cut this short and go and fill our stomachs.
Yeah,
but just
have a little brunch break.
So is that something that like you guys will do? Is that a new kind of aspect to your kind of skating at the moment? Because, you know, as we will get into, there's so many different parts of you know, your life that has just been underpinned by skating and doing it in different circumstances and contexts. And this is a sort of new context in that yeah, it's a pandemic, number one, so it's had this mass effect on the way that people are able to behave and function in society, and they've ended up having a lot more time on their hands. And I suppose it's also like skating's this sort of almost throwback type activity that has set off this huge tsunami of nostalgia in people, and, you know, the sort of motion idea. So I guess there's a few things to that in terms of, you know, and you know, Elnaz is sort of new-ish to your life, I suppose. So there's this sort of multi-pronged new aspect of skating for you. Is that what it is, or is it just for now pandemic type stuff? Or
it's been well, I think a mix of those, a mix of what you're saying. There's elements of all of what you just said that are definitely part of it. I mean, it's been quite a transient quite a transient time for me, a new relationship for the last year and a half, moving out of the warehouse after a decade. It's good, like that was, and kind of finding my bearings again, and working out what the next plan. I guess there's a kind of midlife moved and figuring out what's next in my life at the moment, but also taking some comfort in familiarity with my work, so my place of work, which has given me a really good rooting and a feeling of community and a sense of purpose during the pandemic. And so coming back from leaving the warehouse August 2019, July, August 2019, sort of meeting Elnaz at that time, been pretty much living out of a bag since then, and house sitting, which is just happenstance. It's just that I moved out and someone needed a cat sitter. And so and that then led to me meeting Elnaz. She had a job coming up in India. She had a 9-month contract in Rajasthan at a university, teaching there. We talked a lot. We talked every day while she was away, and things felt like something I wanted to do was to visit her in India, and the plan was to get a visa and go at the end of her 9-month stint. But I kind of went for a spontaneous visit. I thought, do you know what? I can just about afford a trip to see her before Christmas for 2 weeks. I'm going to go to Rajasthan and just go and see her because I missed her. And I thought, I'm going to go see her. So I booked a ticket. And then within 3 or 4 weeks of me booking the ticket, the 9-month contract that she thought she'd be there for, it wasn't the case. She was actually she had things weren't quite working out there the way she thought they were going to. So she actually finished work there when I arrived. She ended her work with the university, and we used the rest of her month business visa to travel as much as we could around India. And so I missed my flight home. I didn't take my flight home purposely. I stayed there.
You've done that before?
No.
Missing flights?
I've missed a few flights. I've missed a few flights that you've been on.
Yeah.
You made them.
Yeah, I got on.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Yeah, that one to Berlin.
It's the Clash. Yeah. Right.
The Clash.
Looking after the younguns. Needed a
and
a wingman.
Actually, shout out to Julian Coulter, who offered to buy me a ticket, and I stupidly said no. I don't know why. I just should have taken him up on that offer.
Julian also stepped in and drove the car that he probably wasn't insured to drive, the rental, when I was basically about to crash us into a fucking tree on the motorway. But yeah, definitely has saved the day on numerous occasions. Julian.
Yeah, he's an amazing person.
I was just because what I was just sort of thinking about your time in Rajasthan, and what we've sort of been talking about, your burgeoning kind of relationship with Elnaz, and I was kind of inquisitive as to like what her sort of entry point leaning into skating was. Obviously being with you is a massive part of that. Did I see quite a bit of skating whilst you were out there in India?
Well, I got my skates on a few times. I took them with me, just thinking I want to have them with me. I don't know if there's going to be anything to skate, but I'll take them. Was that
impulsive or planned?
It was planned. I very much planned around my travel gear. in terms of wanting to be backpacking but have skates. And I'd seen, and I remember having this. Actually, Gareth gave me a projector, and the bag that he gave me in is this really handy kind of executive small travel bag on wheels, or with a long handle, but you can get a pair of skates in it. It's like perfect. So they're not on your back, and you can just wheel them along. So I remember, I can't remember seeing someone in it anyway. But so I took that, and I had my kind of, you know, backpack with a few clothes in it and things like that. But I thought I'm going to just take them, because you never know. And I'm really glad I did, because we took a bus up to the foothills of the Himalayas. We went to Nainital in Uttarakhand, and then we took another bus up to Rishikesh. In Himachal Pradesh. And the day we got there, we went to a cafe. Elnaz has been there before, so we went to this cafe she knew. We were figuring out what hostel to stay in, and I posted a photo of the river, which is part of the Ganges, the Ganga River, coming out of the, you know, this glacial river, beautiful. And it was insanely warm there for like a kind of December morning near the mountains.
I suppose snow-tipped kind of features are what comes to mind when you think of the Himalayas. Yeah,
but a very, very warm, you know, high 20s just at the foothills of them in Rishikesh. So by the time we'd picked a hostel, signed into it, and got into the room, I had a message from Brian Beener saying, "Rishikesh?" ? And I think that evening he had looked me up. He knew what hostel I was staying in from the photograph, and he'd looked me up in the register and just come and knocked on the door. So I opened the door, and Brian's standing there with a friend, and he'd just been at some rainbow gathering, which are these kind of these things that have been, I think, a kind of post-60s development of kind of living off the land festivals, where groups of people go to an area and camp and forage and just go with very little, and it's about sharing ideas around how to just live off the land. And so these rainbow festivals are the gatherings. So I think after being there for a while, they wandered into Rishikesh to just sort of re-up on supplies and so
that's quite an amazing thing actually in itself. I mean, I was a little bit aware of that from some of the things that you'd put online when you could get online. And I had known Brian and his then partner Amelia's intentions to travel to that region because they'd actually been staying here at our house here just before they embarked on that journey, which was then to be, you know, a pretty significant amount of time, I think a year. So I think you ending up, you know, meeting up with Brian out there in that region is pretty amazing thing. Sort of using those analog skills to locate you through registers and stuff like that.
Definitely, and his kind of just being a bit of a magician, and it just you know, materialize.
The
door, you know,
like that, isn't it?
It felt a bit like that. And so that would have been this would be the trip after he made with Amelia, I believe, or the following year, because he's been going 4 or 5 years in a row. And for what I can understand, he's managed to make an incredible pattern of he bought a bike out there. He's got a motorbike that he puts in storage out there, and it's very cheap to get mechanical work done to a bike. So you can kind of, he's done the initial outlay and left the bike there, and then pulls it out of storage and gets it fixed. And he's learned a lot about how to kind of look after the bike himself. And he's been going out with a couple of stills cameras and notepads, and he's writing stories and driving through the Himalayas, and he's been doing that for the last couple of years.
The photos he publishes are absolutely stunning. I mean, you can only just sort of tip of the iceberg sense of like what kind of experience being out there, or having that kind of photographic impetus, you know, just taking these incredible photographs. And it seems like he's got a lot of locations that he's been to and things that he's seen and experienced.
Definitely. I think the time that we bumped into him is the first. I think he was saying it's maybe the first time that he's done a lot of the driving on his own, and has kind of really felt confident enough to go. But I could be wrong in that. But I know he's done. I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of, there's a lot of people traveling around that area, maybe on bikes, or you know. So it's you meet and you meet people along the way. So I guess you do bits of it on your own and with others, but he had some quite amazing stories, which I think he's writing into.
Well, it's almost book-worthy, isn't it? It sounds like doing a trip or a journey, or a sort of length of stay out in you know, area of the world where you know, people have found this kind of gravitational pull to, whether that's just a geographical journey or otherwise maybe a spiritual journey or something like that. Is that so? Your time in India, sort of out there with Elnaz, with your partner, you'd sort of taken skates. Bina just materializes. That's insane. You know, how long do you stay out there for? And I suppose what we were initially sort of touching on was this kind of understanding, maybe from Elnaz at least, in terms of your real desire to put your skates on and touch things, you know, with your feet, basically. And I mean, I did see you skate in some pretty extraordinary places. You put a video out, didn't you?
Yeah, so we Elnaz shot that was a day in Rishikesh. So we went from morning till sunset and went along one strip of the banks of the Ganges.
Yeah, you did a trick basically leading to the Ganges, right?
Yeah, the final trick, which I tried that for maybe an hour, and that was the first thing I went to do after a little warm up on the rail that's down the cobbled path. And couldn't get it, just couldn't figure out jumping down those blocks. Couldn't get my weight. I was just getting so much speed as I was going off each of those enormous concrete blocks down the side of the rail, and that I couldn't get the final turn to get back on to the path. And I was thinking I'm just going to end up in the river. So because it's literally just those blocks, the river, and then and it was hot. It was getting really hot at that point. So took the skates off, took a breather, went along to the next spot I had in mind, left that. Brian wasn't with us at this point. And we went and filmed a couple of other bits, and then went back to the ashram that we'd left the hostel, and we're now staying with Brian in the ashram, which is the clip of him playing guitar. I actually used that song for the duration. And that's just, it's all filmed on an iPhone. It was all edited on the phone, and just some lovely shots of a monkey stealing some bananas in the ashram and eating everyone's fruit and stuff, and then us going out on bikes with Rebecca, who's an amazing yoga teacher that was staying in the ashram, and also was riding a bike. So Elnaz jumped back on the bike. So we'd kind of been out, and I was thinking, God, I really want to go and get that trick back on the bank before sundown. So we kind of raced out with Brian on the bike. And Elnaz jumped on with Rebecca, and we went down there. And I think Brian said, "Why don't you hop off the topsail a little bit earlier and take that first block, and maybe that will slow you down by the time you get, rather than do the topsail and jump to the next one, you're generating a lot of speed jumping down to that one. So it was kind of like a bit of teamwork to get that last one done, you know, with in terms of
So there you guys both are out there in this almost, well, maybe not for Brian, but I would certainly say being in a place like that is a once in a lifetime sort of experience, opportunity to put yourself in. And a lot of people go there for other sorts of reasons, you know, and there you guys are working out, calculating how to do an aggressive inline skate trick. What what was the sort of, because I remember a clip where there's a lot of people clapping and people kind of digging it, but what was the response like? Because you were saying that there are a lot of people there, maybe like Western people who are traveling through. Did you get a good response from people who like lived there and saw you sort of using their infrastructure and stuff in this way, or what was your sense of that?
Everyone was really warm and welcoming. Everyone seemed to really appreciate the efforts that we were making to produce video. Some passers-by with cameras who were you know, Indian tourists in Rishikesh. They traveled from other areas to come on their holidays. I think it was like one of the public holidays, just sort of tail end of a public holiday or beginning of. So there was a few tourists in Rishikesh in the area. It's a popular place. There's a lot of amazing sites to visit there, and there's lots of fundamentals in fundamental sites for Buddhists and Hindus.
Was what
as
you
well.
were doing
So
there part and parcel? Like
there was, I didn't
of...
see, I mean, there was, I mean, there were there's a lot of people that are practicing yoga or meditation on the riverbanks. There's people visiting with families. There's celebrations going on, ceremonies, people putting offerings into the river and doing prayers. There's song and dance along the riverbanks. There's a lot of places where people, so there's a lot of activity
like
along those riverbanks. It's a very sacred kind of, and that's, I guess that came with a certain just I was wary, because it is quite a sacred place, to not you know, I didn't want to disrespect anyone or anything that was going on, but actually was really welcomed. And one I guess one guru who had an ashram on the riverbanks, there's a little clip of me talking to him, where he says no pollution, and in the video, but the extent of the conversation I had with him was amazing. He was really thrilled to see me rollerblading, stopped me, wanted to talk about carbon neutral forms of travel, and that actually he was, because pollution in India is a big issue, and he's part of a global committee that's part of like the G20 summit or something, that is to make more carbon neutral forms of transport. And he saw rollerblading as an incredible carbon neutral thing and wanted to talk more. So if I ever went back, I would go and see him.
He's already got,
I've
like,
got his name written down.
The hardware company, like he's got the designs down, wheels, boots, right, like everything.
The sentiments there. I think he'd probably want some involvement in that area, but the sentiment was definitely there. But that was really cool, and just so a very warm and welcoming, and along with, there was, you know, bloggers and YouTubers who were making videos of Rishikesh and then wanted to film tricks. The one where there's quite a lot of people standing around, the roll in, the jump over, the hop on the next to the tree and jump over. There was a lot of people watching.
I suppose like you know, John Lennon looking motherfucker in India on inline skates, like sliding on shit, is just pretty outstanding, and probably likely to draw Yeah, like pretty positive feedback.
And the Beatles ashram is in Rishikesh at the
Oh, is it
end
really?
at the end of the at the end of the show, which we did try to go to. I did try and convince one of the guards there that I was John Lennon's son, Julian
Mm.
Lennon, to try and get in for free, which didn't work, but we gave it a go.
White man with money trying to con us.
Yeah, it's like not having any of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you had this pretty sounding experience really in
Yeah,
India.
and a big thank you to like Brian for making Rishikesh really special and making that skate moment really special. We then didn't not much skating happened after that. Actually, we went up to the Punjab region, which is on the borders of Pakistan,
Mhm.
and visited the Sikh temple, the Golden Temple there, which is an amazing site, amazing thing. Traveled back down through Rajasthan, and went and spent Christmas Day in Goa, and I cooked a fish curry
Nice.
for a group of people that Elnaz knows, that have been going out on the mad. They're all like in their 70s and 80s, and they've been going out since the Magic Bus tours drove from London to India in the 60s, and
Okay.
they're kind of like some old school hippies that just go every year.
They're still
And
observing the sort of traditions of their like most intense era or period of like traveling, experiencing, expanding their horizons, their minds, whatever. It's like their winter clash or something.
yeah, I get. I mean, it's like it's like a four months of the year, yeah, winter clash that they leave the
Fish curry clash.
curry clash.
Curry clash. Yeah.
So
So
that was amazing. And then I went and stayed with another rollerblader in Sri Lanka, Joe Coyne.
of course you did. Yeah, of
So
course you did.
then the visas expired and we were in Goa, so we flew to Sri Lanka and got some new visas and stayed with Joe until the world changed and everything kind of. We then sort of booked tickets and came home
You
because
came back in 2020, didn't you? Just
came back
after Christmas, just before
they announced
right.
the global pandemic.
Did that sort of spur you on news of what was happening? Was that
A
something
little
that
bit.
sped
I
up the
mean,
decision making?
a little bit. I mean, we were kind of thinking about what to do next, and then sort of there was news that something had happened in China, and then it might be difficult to travel home. And then we booked a ticket, and within the fortnight of us booking a ticket, Sri Lanka had set up quarantine zones around the airport. Certain hotels had been taken over by the military, and it was starting. So
28 days later vibes, yeah.
It was a little bit, yeah. By the time we were leaving,
not ideal. Yeah, I do remember.
but we didn't have any troubles getting home or anything. It was pretty straightforward, and then it was just figuring out what to do here.
Yeah, and we all, we sort of know the story since then a little bit, which I'm sure we can sort of get into a little bit. And
but
yeah,
I guess that loops back round to your initial question about Elnaz and skating, and kind of then leads back into kind of that was the route in, but I guess it's then
it's a natural thread there, isn't it? And it's sort of moving with more grandiose changes in the world that where skating has somehow kind of knitted its way in, both from your experiences abroad and having that, I suppose, like network element of skating just coming into full function, having people materialize at your doorstep, and then, okay, we'll go Sri Lanka is another fucking good pal over there.
Yeah.
And then having this sort of shift of things from, I'd imagine, because I do miss traveling quite a lot, but definitely really grateful to have done these sorts of things like you've described. I've done similar sorts of things, I guess. But the sort of enforced change of things, skating seems to have kind of stuck as a binding thing, which is really cool. And we know that it's got that sort of power and sway over us, really. And I think that's an important thing to kind of understand. Why is there that power and sway? What does that all mean? I mean, thanks for describing that sort of period, that recent period of your life. I think our motivations to get up and go and really try and shake up our lives big moments in life. So
yeah, no, I'm happy to share. I mean, it's like,
yeah, I was wondering, because there are a few different things that I know you very well. Obviously, you're a good pal of mine, so there's lots of different things that I think are interesting. But I suppose for the purposes of getting some ideas out there, I wanted to run a couple of things by you, and just sort of get a sense of where you're at with that. And when I look back over some of your back catalogue, if you will, of skate sections, one of them sort of stuck out a little bit. I mean, they all do, because the quality is very high in terms of the moves and all of that kind of stuff. Always enjoy that. But there was a section that you put out that's sort of not really a section as such, like a full part or anything, but in 2011 you did a part for Shadow for the conference at the time, which is sort of the kind of organization linked to Powerslide, but yeah, you're associated with that branding at the time, Shadow. And so you at the beginning of this section, there's some verbal kind of content. You say some things, right?
Yeah. So it was I think like an introduction. It was an introduction to the flow team or to the conference team.
So that was your introduction.
Team. It was like an introduction video to Shadow.
Should you explain what the conference was?
So the conference was, I think, when Powerslide. So there was I think there was a shift in company ownership. There was a lot of smaller companies that then fell under the conference umbrella that Powerslide had either bought or invested money in, that were companies that were, I guess at that time it was quite financially difficult stage for a lot of companies to. So there was a kind of pooling of resources that happened, and the conference became a lot of companies that now exist as Powerslide, USD, Kaiser, Shadow.
But was the conference, was that an entity in its own right in the UK, or was that it's still at that point absorbed and part of Powerslide? Was it just called the conference as a sort of distribution branding for these brands, or what was your understanding of?
I think my understanding is that the conference ran as a way of a kind of absorbing all of the separate entities into one. So these teams, their riders, everything became the conference. So there was a shift of, I guess, deciding what that looked like and who represented the conference, and that came from all the brands that had become part of the conference. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so then I think that was a global decision. I think that the conference functioned as not just a UK based decision.
Right. Okay. I don't know why I thought that was just the UK. Because I obviously know that there were distribution companies, and distribution companies had under their banner brands. So like TKC, Shiners, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there are like skate brands, from around the world. But at that time, conference accumulated Shadow, but USD, Shadow were different sort of thing.
Well, this was it. I think it was this time where it was like, okay, how are we going to remaneuver this? And there was a lot of restructuring and stuff. And
Sam Crofts could probably help us out with this. Or
Adam would probably be able to.
Because Adam shot the edit.
Adam shot those clips. He was the team manager.
So Adam was the team manager.
Adam was the UK, at least the UK team manager. And I think he was at least the UK team manager. So the decision was made. So the idea was that actually Blake and Dom were optioned for the UK Shadow flow. Dom then moved to Australia.
He was a site now.
So where I think plans where he was going to be operating from Australia, and it was like, it's going to be kind of, we're going to do stuff with Dom over there. And then that he went that way. And then Adam asked me if I wanted to do it with Blake. And so then that was,
and that's right,
that's
or sort of the shadow branch of conference kind of thing. And so the section that I had just mentioned a moment ago was that sort of announcement that you would be a sort of officially partnered with Shadow and moving on with them from there on out. If it's okay with you, I mean, look, I don't know if we'll get any more clarity on the sort of structure of things in terms of like,
I think that's basically it. I
haven't got a fucking clue. But sort of to put that to one side for a second, you had an association in the context of being a sponsored rider. If it's okay with you, I wanted to read back to you some of that spoken content and just get a sense of like your feelings then at that point, and sort of, you know, what you would sort of say about those views.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So of skating, you said it opened up how I see the world and how you see the world differently to others. You went on to say you are outside of mainstream culture. It keeps you outside of things. And then finally, helps you to look in on things and other people's lives, helps you work it all out, building. I was wondering, like, could you expand on any or all of those statements, and has your position like changed with regards to them?
Yeah, I can expand on those. So I guess the idea of being outside of things would be maybe that kind of as a slight segue into what we were talking about last night in terms of aesthetics in skating. I think a lot where my head was at the time I was studying textile design and fashion, very image based and around how we define ourselves with what we wear.
That was at Manchester University.
That was in Manchester. So yeah, then I had close ties with the Manchester skate scene. I met Adam a few times before moving to Manchester, but was really like welcomed into the whole family there with you know, a big hug, a very warm welcome. So yeah, that was cool. And we yes, but going back to that kind of, I think at that time it was just a sort of looking at how what we were talking about last night. We were talking about kind of subculture. I guess that's a good place to start. So talking about mainstream, I'm talking about mainstream culture at that time. And I think I was looking a lot at subcultures, especially kind of outsider art, but also, I guess, anti-establishment movements, the punk movement, the hippie movement, which draw, I think, from influences from my family, and that kind of that era of music and fashion, and the influences that came from my mum.
Because your mum was quite flowery.
Yeah, she's a bit of a hippie. She's a hairdresser. She's a Clapham girl at heart, but you know, has been through, I think, an era of being a bit of a modern and then a bit of a rocker and then a bit of a hippie, but kind of identified with certain music. She's very into Led Zeppelin, very into Hendrix, David Bowie, and those kind of records were on in the house a lot growing up. And so it's kind of an extension of how there are these subculture movements and I think that was something I was exploring a lot at the time And
we're
so
sort of thinking of,
that's where that kind of idea of it keeps you outside of things. So I think skating is synonymous with subculture. Skating's synonymous with anti-establishment movements, because there's certain aspects of acceptance or non-acceptance within wheeled sports that then led us to look at how we identified ourselves, what we were, what we do. What does that look like? What's the dialogue around it? What are the images we were making? And a kind of a very explorative time within skating that then fed into everything else I was doing. So, and it felt kind of a similar dialogue between the kind of things that my mum had kind of grown up listening to and being part of, and kind of keeping herself outside of things and being, you know, a little bit out of outside things as well in that sense. So
you started describing, to start with, a kind of connection or fascination with aesthetics and your sort of textiles and clothing interests, which ultimately lead you to Manchester in terms of study. Also, something you mentioned a moment ago was, you know, the different sort of identity shifts that your mum had sort of journeyed through in the eras of her younger life. So for me, like, in a way, identity is like a really important word as well, like aesthetics, and also like the iconography. So like the iconographic quality of these subcultured movements somehow speak to you, do they? And so what's mainstream culture?
At that time, to explore the statement I made at that time, I think iconography was really a fascinating part of the fashion and textile industry as well, and how image making and presentation of that image and the spokespeople for that image that and how we kind of I guess moved through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s of culture and pop culture and Western idealism, and that kind of image making and presenting that in individuality, and taking a statement on how you dress and how you present yourself, and that somehow identifies with how you think and the sort of person you are, and the sort of things that you surround yourself with, and your personality. So, and all of those things are and so I think I've always wanted to try and bring some of that through to how I present myself in skating, or at least at that time it was very much about identifying with certain maybe I guess anti-establishment or certain punk parts of culture, and trying to conjure up a bit of that imagery within my skating.
Why is there for you like a drive or a connection to sort of, you know, synthesize those outward kind of obvious elements of those particular subcultures with the sort of anti-establishment sort of thing? How did that, like,
reflecting on that now, looking back at what I was doing, and, you know, trying to sum it up without, you know, too many words, and I think just that it was a kind of wanting to express a certain feeling of being outside of what felt like the things that most people were doing, and that would be how I saw the mainstream. So everyone was in the mainstream, and rollerblading was outside of that. And so there was this push and pull between building myself. I guess I'm studying academically at a university to find a path, a route for my for some sort of career, or to something that I'm going to do that's going to financially hold some weight and keep me going. And but there's this other thing that I'm doing that is kind of the thing that I'm wanting to put all my energy in, that is running parallel to that, but is maybe more of an aberration. It doesn't, I couldn't quite get the two to, you know, in the same place. So there's this then visual expression of that, which comes out in a kind of anti-establishment punk way, because it's a revolt against the mainstream. It's a revolt against wanting to have to abide by certain rules or or things that I'm being schooled in, that I have to then, you know. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, it does. I mean, you never quite turned into a fully fledged anarchist or criminal.
no.
But that does make an awful lot of sense. And what was your sort of concept of the mainstream at that point in time? Would you give examples of what the kind of life over there was looking like, and what that sort of made you feel like, in terms of, because I kind of got what you were saying. It's like you're sort of doing
well,
both things. You are in the mainstream culture to an extent, like you are obviously, but the idea is,
well, I mean, I guess a great way of I mean, if I compare it to the world we live in now, to the world we lived in then, I think now there's a real focus on being able to present yourself online and in your, you know, well, mainly, I guess, online. You can find a way of presenting the thing that you love, and that thing that you love can become monetary. It can become there's ways of monetizing what you do within this network of things we have. I don't think that quite existed when I was studying in Manchester. So the roots, or at least I hadn't seen it yet. So there wasn't a kind of obvious way of finding a way of monetizing my skating, or making it into the thing that I just do, that being the, you know, an I don't know, but that
where you're at with things now.
Yeah, there was a way of presenting it visually that felt like more of a kind of I guess that was more linked to maybe artistic or music production, in terms of how you present yourself as an artist. And I guess there was the kind of idea of the poor struggling artist, which is a bit of a fallacy in itself, but there's kind of like that happens within music, and that kind of you know, the Bob Dylans and Ollie Shorts that go out with a guitar and travel around from place to place, and you know, the rolling rock. It's just that kind of yeah, there was those kind of, that was push and pull for me, I guess, and carried on for a long time, which was the push and pull of wanting to go and, you know, float in the breeze and go on that kind of thing, but then being also wary of, let's just actually, you know, also just be mindful of building something that's a little bit more safe and substantial, and so that's, yeah, I don't know if that...
you were, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it's like a statement of personal development, I suppose.
Yeah,
so there's
yeah, very
something
much so.
that's
and reading that, referencing Cole Young, it's a sort of it's I mean, I've always had
well, I should say before, I should say,
oh, did we say that yet?
well,
No,
because
we
there's
didn't.
the other interesting,
yeah.
the other interesting part about the video, in the actual description of it on Vimeo, I think Adam wrote it, and he'd sort of said, well, Neil's been reading Man and His Symbols, which is a book by Carl Jung, one of many books Carl Jung has written. And you touched on Jung's outline as a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, with some sort of reference to like dream experience. And I guess I was curious to understand how that text sort of found its way into a biography on Vimeo of like a kind of introductory skate section for you to be like representing a brand. It's like, I was like, oh, Carl Jung, Man and His Symbols.
Yeah.
I remember we were touching on these things at that point, but just how it worked its way into the bio.
Well, I mean, that book, I guess there's a link between what I've just said about image making and how to visually represent yourself, and Jung's work in the subconscious mind, and how to evaluate dream images and dream psychology and all of these archetypal symbols that appear in the mind, but also the kind of absorbing of experience as you grow, and then and somehow understanding the effects that those images have on you, and what those images mean and where they draw from. And I think at that time it was just a kind of an important it was an important thing that I read a few times. I actually really wanted to do, I think I really wanted to go into psychology. I just didn't get the kind of grades at school. It meant I went into an art background. That's kind of, that's rather than a kind of academic background.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always really fascinated. And then I think it was probably you going into your healthcare route and certain texts that you were reading at that time, and us also exploring. I mean, I remember we were all kind of bouncing in and out of secondhand bookshops and finding texts that were kind of around, I guess, a mix of books around sites,
like altered states of consciousness, stuff
altered
like that.
states of consciousness, but also the kind of Jack Kerouac on the road beatnik generation, and
that
along
probably
with
come primarily, I mean, at least in my experience, that a lot of that sort of line of inquiry would have been inspired by Joe to an extent.
Definitely.
But probably
think,
before I started my training, but
and a real influence on what, and I guess a real influence from what Joe was interested in and what she was reading, and kind of shout out to Joe for giving us all these amazing books.
But why is it that
but I think
talking about personal development, looking at yourself, and so like have you had and form and things like that, did you have profound like dream experiences? Did you have like eureka moments when you read that somehow filtered in to sort of your concept of inline stuff and where that was all going?
Well, I think there's it's all the stuff that happens when you're not skating that you then bring back to. So I think the links between all of the images and conjuring up of images in the mind when you're not skating, and how you kind of do all of these processes and you kind of like meditating on certain moves and certain aspects of exploring how the mind works in that Man and the Symbols book felt very linked with how I was thinking about certain things within skating, and it had a great language for exploring how certain areas of the subconscious work and how the mind works behind the scenes, and to try and sort of pick together what was maybe happening in my development as in skating and more in other areas of life as well.
Would you say that, good points, would you say that there is like the use of the word meditation in the sort of framework of skating is interesting, because I suppose the actual practice of meditation really moves away, or should I say, there's a distinction in my view between the practice of meditation and maybe like a visualization situation that you're in, right? Like what you said around it's when you're not skating, and when you're not skating, I mean, God, most days I would say, I mean, when I'm at work, that's a different thing because I'm quite engulfed by what's happening there. But even then, right, I could have had a really intense moment just a minute ago at work and just be like in my car, and my attention will be drawn towards like a shape or a form, often some sort of street furniture, often an assembly of blocks or ledges, or, you know, literally could be a tree with a slight curvature, and I'm fucking looking at it as if it's skatable. And then what fires off in your mind is the sort of shapes, forms, body positions, postures, if you will, that fit in that area and what your sort of experience and skill set's been. So that's a really quite acutely visual sort of process of not nothingness. I'm actually I'm inviting that experience on. I'm saying I'm really concerned with that sort of experience, body posture, movement, moving in it, grinding, feeling it, all of that stuff. Whereas I suppose the meditative situation is sort of, you're not inviting in visualizing and thoughts as such, they're occurring, but you're sort of trying to kind of just sit and breathe and mitigate the busyness of all of that.
And there's something about letting, but within meditation, you're letting thoughts pass. So the thoughts are always there. There's a level of, well, from at least from my understanding so far, is that there's a letting, a process of going back to the breath, letting the breathing become the focus, so that you then connect with what's going on in your body, and then kind of going into different realms, different states of consciousness, where you're more outside of your body or more inside your body, and doing checks on the body and the breath, but coming away from the thoughts. And I think there was a process of going through that sort of that dream psychology that Jung speaks about, and has spent his life's work doing, and all of the Jungian Society's work, and the people that wrote Man in a Symbol were 4 or 5 scholars, young scholars who then went and explored areas in the book, different areas of his core research, and expanded on them while he was at at later stages in his life. Most of that book was assembled while he was in bed and bedridden and couldn't write, and he was just speaking to these 4 or 5 students, who then assembled the book from his his work and from what he told them. So there is a kind of in that book, there is a kind of meditation practice going on, of first analyzing thought, but then understanding those symbols and a kind of letting go of it, which I think was helping me at that stage with the overwhelming sense of having to find my, my bread in London, and getting back into a life in London, and finding somewhere to live, and doing all those things, and being kind of overwhelmed with not just those thoughts, but also, as you described, the images of every moment, seeing a trick, being here, being that, thinking of what I could do with my body over there, and what my mind. So it's like a kind of distilling of those things, and trying to kind of find a way of breathing through all of those thoughts. And that book really helped to initially get, it's one of those books you pick up and you read a section of it, and you realize that you didn't understand any of it. You just read, 3 or 4 pages.
Something quite amazing happened upstairs.
Something quite amazing happens. And then you kind of go, well, did I just read this? Has it gone in? You go back and you reread it, and then you do the kind of logic side of the brain bit of kind of taking in what's on the page. But it takes you to other states of mind, and I think it's really good to connect those other states of mind. And as we can see from the kind of the overwhelming and outpouring amount of people that have gone into mind and body health at the moment, and how important mind and body health has become, not especially at the moment with the pandemic, but even just in a wider sense of the world. It's this global network and social media outpour of people connecting with their body and their mind and wanting to do more yoga and more meditation practice and all these new apps. So it's kind of, I think for me, that was a time where these books and these things were helping me kind of just assimilate thoughts and let them go, rather than getting like trapped in a loop of frustration, of maybe thinking about doing the trick so bloody much that it was frustrating that I wasn't just out skating and then the level of focus goes, you're not focused on what you're doing. As you said, you at work, you now have a way of engaging fully with your work, and then and then you leave your work and you engage fully with your rollerblading, and that's learned. That's kind of a thing that a process of going through. And I think definitely when I was writing those things or talking about that book, it was an important time of figuring out.
You were quite keenly aware of being inundated with lots of information that required kind of examination and sort of mediating, which is quite a close word to meditating, but mediating is sort of that inner kind of control, awareness, and sort of behaving, as appropriately as you can around that. And I suppose like Jung's work, as far as I sort of understand so far, I mean, the archetype and the idea behind the archetype's an important idea of Jung. And, he's certainly really concerned with that personal intuition and also the kind of terrain of the psyche, and those kind of levels of feeling and thought and experience and physiological and psychological kind of experience a human being can have, and the sort of meaning behind that. And there's a very personally unique quality everybody has to be aware of that state of being, I guess. And I suppose and as you were just saying, for any person, especially right now in this really difficult moment for people in their minds, more of a light is drawn upon our kind of need to try and do that and mediate somehow, and maybe through this practice of skating. I say practice, I mean, for me it's probably turned into a practice along with other kind of definitions of things, but I think we've been well practiced at sort of mediating this sort of being inundated with this kind of creative urge, and sort of bodily urge to move and fit into kind of spaces in ways that may not have been thought of before. And that's quite a lot of mental and physical output on top of trying to be successful, earn money, figure out who you are, identify in the right way or the way that aligns with what you actually feel inside, and that kind of thing. And I think skating does take us through like a journey like that. What I would say right now, would you want to just take a moment pee break?
Yeah.
There will probably be people who will watch this who actually don't know you. I mean, I know you very, very well, but there might be some people who don't know you very well. Would you want to say something about, what was your entry point into skating? Like, what kind of incited things? How did that get going for you?
Yeah, well, so I started actually on quads. So I started skating on quads, and I had some Bowers. I think I had some Bauer turbos, and I was going to roller discos quite a lot. So there was a really cool thing called Challenger. In
Challenger 2000.
Challenger 2000
in Chessington.
In Chessington, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I went. Did you go to Challenger?
Yeah. I went. So Carl Boys.
Yeah.
Do you remember Carl?
Yeah, I know Carl. Yeah.
So yeah, I like Carl went to Challenger, and I never met him there either.
I don't know.
And I know you. Yeah, I know you went to Challenger. We have spoken about this. I'm
Okay.
sure.
All right.
But but we didn't meet there either, which is. It's kind of amazing. It means that probably quite a few people went there at that time. But there was also a roller disco in Red Hill which had there was quite a big like roller hockey team in Red Hill, and so there was this bunch of guys that were very like, you know, they were real jocks. They were kind of real like quite quite full on. They were quite like a full on group of guys, a couple of years older than me, at this roller disco, but they all had rollerblades, and they would do like, you know, really fast sprints. They'd be up and down where most of the kids were going around
showing off.
They'd be showing off, you know, going through the middle, doing fast stops. But I saw them on the rollerblades, and I thought, God, the movement is different, and the way they move is different, and the way they can kind of use their body is different. And I was going with my next door neighbour, Clark Mackenzie, and I think he got some Solomons. I think he got some like ST80s or something, and I just thought, wow, they look amazing. And I got some Oxygens.
This is after Challenger, because Challenger is a go-kart track, basically.
Yeah. So
Challenger 2000 was a go-kart track, and that would have been in the 90s. That would have been in the late 90s.
Yeah.
That would have been before Sally's, but Sally's came out in what, like 99? Was that the first photo of Salomon's, the pair that Micah Parlick was holding in Daily Bread or something? They were like black ones or something. Solomon's were 90s actually, for sure.
I can't quite remember the
dates.
dates.
Literally 100 years ago.
Clark might have had another pair of skates before that. But I kind of remember that kind of I that sort of the time I had a set of Oxygens.
But when did you first see skating? Like, I mean, obviously going to Challenger is one thing, and after I started skating, I found myself at Challenger not that long after. But
then what happened was that there was a group of guys that were skating in Red Hill at the roller disco, and they had different skates. They didn't have hockey skates. They had different skates, and they had things that had been like CDS Detroit blocks that had been
plates,
strapped to side of them, and there was this kind of metal structure over the side of the recreational centre in Red Hill.
Is that by the hospital? No.
Yeah. But
sorry, I
believe so. But there's these two huge red X's that will go over the side of the building. There's a big car park there, might be shared with the hospital. I think it is like next to the. I think you go. Yeah.
You know what? I think I'm just talking about. There's like a helicopter or an airport or some shit dome thing.
Oh, right.
I literally don't know what I'm talking about now. But anyway, there was a roller.
So there's a roller disco, and then there's like this structure over the top of the recreational centre, and it meant that there was this long red bar outside. So I think when I had some quads, I tried to probably do a front side on.
Where did quads come from? Like, where did the quads? Yeah, where? I'm talking about like the sort of like the eureka moment, you know, of like movement forwards on skates is lit. I'm doing this.
Well, I mean, the kind of the feeling of having just like the wheels under feet feeling and being like, oh my God, I want to do this all the time, I think was just kind of getting quads, which I think was probably, I was going to like car boot sales quite a lot. Okay. Like my mum was doing a lot of buying and selling, and
like thrift sales.
Yeah, like she was doing a lot of sort of thrift, and that led into her doing antiques for a long time. She was a bit of a lovejoy. And so I think I got some quads at a car boot sale. So I just wanted to try. I think I just saw them. Yeah, they look good. And then that with the progression from quads was through the roller disco and seeing people move differently. I think the movement and the speed the kind of turns and was something. And then there was a couple of guys that had these skates at the roller disco that were doing, and that's one of those is Adam Nazarko. So that's like
nice.
yeah. So Adam lived just down the road from me, and but yeah, and then I think like Clark, my next door neighbor, got skates and he got a video, and I think it was the Aussie video, the Yellow Brick Road. So I think that was like my first real, and then it was Hoax 3 and it was VG6, Toys Beneath Our Feet, and there was kind of a pool of videos, but I had a very loose connection to the scene. There wasn't, apart from me and Clark and then sometimes seeing Adam in Red Hill, there wasn't much of a wider connection to the scene than seeing a couple of videos and putting a bench outside my house and just trying to replicate what I'd seen in the video.
Is this the late 90s still? Like Yellow VG6? This is all late 90s still, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I say Yellow Brick Road VG6. What binds those two videos is the very strong Australian component to each of those videos. Is it your dad's Australian, right? Is that?
Yeah. My dad's an Aussie. Yeah. His family's actually from the Outer Hebrides. They're Scottish, but they're like I think my granddad was stationed there in the war, and so he grew up there. He's an Aussie. He grew up in Adelaide, surfer. And met my mum in London. He moved here. He was really into motorbikes and set off with a friend, and they ended up leaving Australia on putting their bikes in a shipping container, driving them through Europe, and ended up in London, and realizing that there was lots of cheap motorbikes in France. And so they got a van and they were driving them up and doing them up and selling them in London. And then he met my mum and settled there.
So he almost done the Yellow Brick Road, the sort of Dick Whittington style Yellow Brick Road to London. You're watching Yellow Brick Road, the skate video.
Yeah. There's definitely some. I just thinking about Yellow Brick. I hadn't really thought about that being an Aussie video for a long time, and thinking that, and I mean that's an interesting thing, because I think a lot of the energy I put into skating was around the time my parents split up. And so the idea that this Aussie video, my Aussie dad leaving home and skating and putting all my energy into it, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on there, which is quite interesting. But
were you angry?
I think I'm not sure how angry I was at that time. I think that maybe that frustration and anger, or at least I probably understood what that frustration and anger was a lot later in life. I don't know if I really understood maybe that frustration and anger at that time, but maybe a lot of that frustration and anger went into rollerblading. Maybe I put a lot of that into,
It seems like an appropriate venue for deep feelings.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of getting padded up, doing this quite, it's a full body contact. It's a full contact sport, but the contact is with you and the road or the pavement or the
rail.
So it's like, or the rail or the object. So it's a kind of definite place to vent frustration. I think there's maybe that I made that connection a lot later on, though. I don't think I was kind of going out thinking I'm gonna go and
but I knew I knew that skating was a venue for kind of the dilemmas of who I'm going to be, or whether, mum and dad are arguing and stuff was kind of shitty at home.
Yeah.
Like in that moment, the venue was to really go out there, and there was a cathartic kind of venting, that happens, I suppose, with skating.
Yeah, definitely. And
I'd
that
imagine
kind of
like
escapism from what was going on at home, and also the feeling of freedom, of movement. So I guess there was a lot there, definitely. But
so you sort of you're taking in skate videos. You were in just south of London, in Hooley, which is sort of near enough Croydon in South London.
Yeah.
You've got some people there who are skating, one of which we know is still putting on the skates, Adam, for sure.
Yeah.
So, was there a point where you knew that, or you had accepted, or you had made that sort of internal statement like, okay, this is the thing for me, like I can't really imagine not having this mode of like,
I mean, I get there's what I think then a wider connection to it that happened, which was maybe getting dial-up modem and a computer at the house, and getting things like Yahoo Messenger and MSN Messenger, and meeting, well, shortly after that I would have met you. I would have met Ali first. Ali's one of the first of Ali Brightwell, who lived in just down the road from me in Red Hill, was skating around there a lot. And then I met a lovely guy called Mark, he was skating with a lot. And then we started going to Skate Trim, which was one of like Adam Nazarko's old haunts. He's like,
that was the skate park that was in a church. That was the first one of those.
That's right. Yeah. So it was in a like a hangar type, old aircraft hangar bunker around the corner. There's an old airfield, and just around the corner from that, when it got moved out of the hangar, they acquired a church and put a vert ramp under a stained glass window. It's amazing. It's like an amazing venue.
Yeah.
And I mean that. There's a lot to be said about skating. I mean, learning to skate in there and have, convincing my mum to drive me to Skate Trim at least once a week, if not twice.
I suppose you're quite
wanting
used
to go to church. I mean,
because you're quite used to the sort of the trope of being a good person that goes to church. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good church goer. So there's like a moral sort of like kind of browning points you get from the idea of going to church. But I suppose when they've put the skate park in there, it's like going to church,
So that was there's that whole thing. And then I met Danny Atkinson and Matt Chilvers, and Ali was a big part of the Croydon skate scene, and that was then a wider connection to skate scenes in central London, like the Faculty.
Early 2000s now, and by this point you're really you've sort of fully got going, really, and it just sort of happens. Is it as much, so there's the actual practice of skating, but there's this huge like social component to it, where it's actually about the time and the quality of time that you spend with other like-minded people, younger guys at the time. Obviously there's not too many women who were hanging around with at the time. The uptake of female skating was really not a thing at the time, so it was, I guess, a very male,
in contrast to like the roller discos, which is quite
absolute dream,
quite like show
offy,
and also just a quite unisex pursuit.
Definitely.
that you just there's not really any, and then being in quite a male a male oriented environment and set of experiences.
The aggressive sort of definition just like got rid of all diversity, gender diversity. Basically, it's just like, all right, these dudes are going to go off there and start chucking themselves about. We'll just stick in the roller discos. I mean, Lord knows how long roller discos stuck about for. I'm sure they kind of went away and then have probably subsequently come back, or maybe there's been a sustained roller disco scene that we're just really not aware of. Challenger actually had a grind rail, and they had a quarter pipe, as far as I remember. So there, even there was a kind of multidisciplinary thing where it's not just you know, there was grinding and aggressive stuff. But it's like we went off into the streets as like a group who became quite friendly, quite, you know.
There's actually just a shout out as well. There's a group of people that I started a skate club with at secondary school in year 9. There was a small group of maybe 5 or 6 people. 2 people I think were on quads. The rest of us had rollerblades. I think I had rollerblade Dirks at this point. And Nick, friend Nick, who then was part of SS20, he moved to Eastbourne that summer. But we actually did have an evening thing where we were jumping downstairs, and there was a small handrail in the school that we were grinding, and we did that. A skate club. We started a Wednesday night skate club, and we did it for a term, but we weren't allowed to continue doing it because we kind of marked one of the rails. We'd kind of damaged a rail, so they didn't want us to continue doing.
Going to be doing a lot more of that. Over the following 20 plus years. So I mean, I'm really familiar with, you know, the kind of echelons of skating in London. There are a few things that I wanted to just kind of zoom in on for a second, and it sort of just goes back a little bit when we were thinking about Manchester and your time spent there, because you sort of have this entry into skating. You know, we've spoken a little bit about the aesthetics, the kind of awareness of culture, the self-examination and development, and the sort of mainstream idea of having to be successful in a mainstream context. So like going to study is going to be part of that, to kind of elevate yourself and be able to function in society, kind of thing. Whilst you're in Manchester, you're at university, you obviously have an experience there at university. You mentioned that you had met numerous people from the Manchester scene, and I'm also aware that you met Sam Curry and Anthony Zinanos whilst you were out there as well. So I kind of wanted to circle back and have a think about, obviously I'm wearing the Dirtbox today, and I think, you know, Dirtbox as a brand, as a fashion label, as a cohesion of amazing skate artists, as a venue or a destination for lots of people who just are into like core kind of progressive skating, I suppose. Like all of those things speak to me. I wondered if you could say a little bit about your meeting of Sam and Anthony, actually, maybe with the backdrop of Manchester, and just go into how things got going with Dirtbox a little bit, and sort of what Dirtbox kind of meant for you and what your level of involvement was with that.
So I think I just graduated from Manchester, and I was doing some, because I did the second year of my degree in Hong Kong, and then I'd returned to Manchester. I was part of this ambassador program for Manchester Metropolitan University, which meant I could.
You went away for a year, didn't you?
I was I did a year in Hong Kong. It was like a polytechnic university that I was at, and so they had these schemes to to study at other polytechnics, and Hong Kong was one of the ones that I could go to. It was a paid exchange. It was an amazing experience, a paid exchange through the university to study there for a few terms, and I got to skate with all of the Hong Kong guys, and they really looked after me as well. But then I was working at the university the year after, and was working there for the summer and a few months after, and I think it was a Slam Jam event maybe, and Sam and Anthony were in Manchester after the event, and we were at a bar, and we spoke a little bit, and they told me that they were doing this thing, and they wanted to work with me, and liked what they'd seen recently. I think.
What had they seen?
I think they'd well,
do you remember?
I guess it was probably some stuff that I'd been doing with Ben Shelbourne, maybe like Let It Never End, maybe a few tricks in that.
Okay. They would have seen stuff earlier than that, right?
Yeah, and then I guess it would have been maybe Team.
Because you would have built up a bit of a head of steam really before.
Yeah, but then I guess it was probably maybe a wider. I was probably putting out a few bits and pieces while I was at university, but I didn't really put out that much video content whilst I was at university.
That wasn't social media vibes then, really.
There was a little bit of MySpace and Facebook going on, right. So there was Facebook. Well, I know, probably just MySpace actually. Probably. Well, no, maybe a little bit of Facebook towards the end. Maybe Facebook had just started. I don't know, but yeah. It was, so I was probably, they'd maybe seen things of me in Hong Kong. I think I definitely had put out some still images. I don't think I put out any video. And then maybe there was a few clips in a couple of Manchester edits that Adam had made. Yeah. Maybe like a Bone Skate Park edit, a couple of clips here and there, and then Let It Never End. Had a few clips in that. And I think also in a wider sense, because I was into printmaking and image making, and they were starting an image making brand. Mm. Anthony's an image maker. He's an amazing illustrator. Sam's an amazing image maker. So it was a like-minded thing that we could start producing images together, which didn't quite materialize that way. My involvement with them, I did design a t-shirt, but then we did continue.
So you have that discussion.
So then we have this chat in a bar, and they say, look, we want to work with you, and I'm kind of really honored, because I think at that point I wasn't that. I think my ideas of any sort of involvement in skating had kind of dissolved a little bit into my focus with my degree work, and skating felt a lot, even, I mean, although I had I think I'd internalized a lot of aspirations and desires and wants for what I could imagine skating to be. I mean, I'd grown up with people like you and who had made by that point had already had a career in rollerblading, a professional career, had a pro skate with a company. So I kind of knew what that looked like and had kind of similar desires and aspirations, but I think my energy and focus was going into another area, which was image making and print making and all of these things that I was doing at the time. And somehow it all looped back round, and I met Sam and Anthony, and we were talking about how to do that within skating. And so there was this kind of merging and marrying of things in a way that I hadn't imagined. Or
was that a memorable sort of conversation? Is it I mean, I'm not asking you to like divulge the word contents of it, but
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you
like
word for
aligned
word,
on
but
a...
it's definitely it's definitely a moment, a really fond, like fond memory, and like a very important moment, because I think it added value and context and meaning to my skating that I hadn't added before, which was and it kind of gave me a sense of confidence in my skating and my ability, and my worth as what I was doing, because it showed me a kind of wider appreciation for what I was doing in that sense.
And your ideas, I suppose, and also, you were just saying that although you had people close to home that had sort of shown some success, like in terms of skating professionally or whatever, and was still trying to sort of do that. I think even in those years, 2004, 5 kind of thing, probably a bit earlier, it was becoming clear at that point that not sure it is that doable actually. It's not looking that doable really. So there was that kind of
a little bit of teething, a kind of I guess teething period to
a new way to be a skater, or a new way to
to
be
try and
invested in
how do we work our way through this bit, so there's kind of and that was an amazing moment, definitely, to be approached by those two.
What happened after that?
Well, there was talks of doing a tour. There was talks of introducing me to some other people that they valued highly, like Umberto, and that Lee and Dan were already, Dan Ives and Lee Mainland were already a big part of it. And there was probably, I think, within a year we were doing the Paris trip.
I've seen the video. I actually watched that quite recently, prior to doing this talk with you, because I was very distant in a way to that time for you, and I didn't really know an awful lot about that trip, certainly. And like my memory is just like pretty poor anyway. But what was that
happened, but
was that like? I mean, the trip looked amazing.
It was an amazing experience. Just the wider sense of kind of indulging in that idea of all of the things that it felt to kind of be a skater, which is to go on tour, which is to produce videos and meet new people and share this thing and make some images with it and make some art with it and kind of do all that. So to get a chance to do that was really amazing.
So you're doing some work out there as well?
In terms of image making within the skating, I think.
Like doing skating.
Within,
sure.
And actually, like, in terms of like the image making with skating, but also, I mean, Sam and Anthony are just super fun, highly charged people to be around. They're like they've got a sort of genius about them that's just a real high energy to be around, and they were really excited to be doing this, and there was a lot of excitement around what we were doing at the time. And there again, a lot of those kind of punk ideas and anti ideas were playing into what we were doing, and that kind of comes out. I think in the video it comes out in how it's edited and the kind of antics that we're getting up to. Umberto had, I think one of Umberto's friends had kindly let us stay in their apartment while they were away,
where all of the drinks were finished,
where all c'est fini,
c'est fini.
So there's like the and getting to, that was my the first time I met Umberto was
Oh,
there.
really? That was the first time
Yeah.
you met Umberto?
Yeah.
I mean, that was definitely the kind of like inclusion in a skate part that made you think or made you feel that the protagonists in the part were sort of, you know, rock star types, you know, throwing caution to the wind types, you know, drunk and whatever else, you know, emptying all drinks, and we're just out here, you know, with skates on our feet, not giving a fuck really, and just being kind of
Yeah.
being sort of,
And I think playing into that kind of
because Sean Santa Maria was there as
that
well.
very punk vibe. Yeah. Sean was out there. Yeah, Sean was out there, and he meant a lot to the Paris scene at that point, because Le Sean's is a tribute to Sean. That's the Le Sean's is a tribute to Sean Santa Maria, and the kind of I guess the meantime Hollywood experience in rollerblading, personified in a group of young punks in Paris and in Lyon, that then kind of roll with it. And
so they kind of subcultured the subculture, like they
they ran with this kind of, I guess, I mean, I imagine that
not culture maybe, but the look, the feel, but there's something under that, because we were talking about
which I guess
identity,
is
iconography,
and you've got a lot of the kind of Hollywood, that like kind of Hollywood culture that comes from the another anti movement and in kind of post punk, and that kind of all of the look and aesthetic that comes with that. And I guess that probably plays a big part in most of that group of skaters lives and family setups and all the rest of it, and then that then somehow manifests itself in that image and influences a bunch of young skaters in France to start a movement named after Sean Santa Maria, and
what summed up,
and then we're skating with him in Paris.
It's always amazing to me that you know, groups can kind of formulate based on that kind of idea, that then, you know, Sean ends up, as we're talking about, Bina metamorphosizing somewhere, just appearing somewhere. You end up having Sean just appear in physical form over there, and you know, we know it's tricky for our friends out in the States to venture out of their country for financial reasons, and the fact they don't have much, you know, holiday time. One thing that stuck out to me from that video was the clear attitude that's abundant throughout the video. But one of the things, I mean, Sam skating, although seldom seen, is actually pretty bloody amazing. But it's the role,
the negative Mistral up that thing in La Défense to the stale out is standout. I mean,
it's often the sort of the cross legs roll away, and you know, like Lily, he's like, he does that kind of style of roll away as well. It's just such a kind of take that kind of attitude, and it's often looking back as well, like just sort of looking back at where you've just come from with that kind of attitude of take that, you know. And
it's synonymous with the kind of stance of the musicians that you're listening to, the album covers you've seen. I mean, the big hair, the kind of maybe slightly flowing long something on top, slightly tighter on the legs, which goes back to that kind of hair metal era of music, and this sort of stance of strutting on stage and kind of, you know, moving, and which is, I guess, that there's a whole side of it that goes into you know, I guess different musical genres, but also different kind of dances or how you move and to certain music. And there is a kind of you know, strutting and peacocking
totally
goes
see
with
that.
and that kind of, I think, was then brought from the music into the skating and into
It's like this cross pollination going on there that creates a sort of a discernible period of you know, content, of soft goods, of video profiles, video content. I know Negret was a huge part of that. I mean, you know, his forum, his space of video content really demonstrated, you know, as you had said, in the meantime, for sure, that was, you know, the kind of feeling was rife in that video. Just to kind of go back to sort of kind of things emanating from Dirtbox, because this is so that's so fascinating. Just the kind of LeSean's idea and the subjective kind of quality of what skating looks like, having all of these elements underneath it. You'd said that that things didn't kind of go maybe the way that you felt they could have in terms of your involvement with Dirtbox, but you did end up designing a t-shirt. So tell us a little bit about that design, and also, you know, maybe where did you feel that things were going to go, like with Dirtbox, and you know,
well, where things might have gone would have been, I guess, just I was setting my sights higher in terms of the level of involvement I'd have as a rider, the sort of productions I'd be putting out, and the level of content I'd be making. I mean, for a more modern word, content in terms of the images that I could make for them that would then end up on t-shirts or be part of soft goods, or images that I could make whilst on the skates and off the skates. I think they're just my ambitions were set higher to be involved with them more closely. But just the push and pull of other commitments in life meant that it became a different involvement. And I did design a t-shirt with them, which was a book cover. I scanned in a book cover that said skating by and an author's name, and I changed the author's name to Dirtbox, and it was a man ice skating in a tweed suit, and he kind of looked like he was clicking his fingers like a kind of James Brown move on ice skates, but just thought the stance was really good. So just sort of adapted that, and Sam and Anthony printed out a run of those.
you have one?
No, I don't. I actually don't have. I think I've got the Dirtbox t-shirt that's got a red pocket.
Yep.
That's.
You like that one?
I think that's the only one I've got left. I don't know. I don't really know what happened to them all. I know a few got pinched off washing lines and things at the warehouse. Oh. Things, you know, when you live with
Dirtbox is good clobber. I don't
exactly,
doubt that it could get
definitely a few went walkies, but unfortunately that they I don't have more than one Dirtbox t-shirt left actually.
What were the other sort of kind of highlight points or important junctures in that kind of journey with Dirtbox, and where did things ultimately kind of go with Dirtbox and that association with Sam and his and Anthony's ideas and being associated with them?
I guess it links quite closely with the conference in terms of wanting to produce video with Adam, Sam and Anthony, and at some point Sam and Anthony focused a lot more on his illustration work, and Sam became much more of a sole entity with Dirtbox, and so I think then Elliot became part of the team. Mm-hmm. And then Dean became part of the team, and there was a move into different riders. But for that time, I produced. I just tried to get on my skates as much as I could, and with a camera, and send Sam Sam as much as I could to at that time. I was doing a lot of groundwork in London and trying to sort of establish myself and in a production company in Soho, which was there was a lot of push and pull at the time, just sort of immediately after my involvement with Dirtbox. I mean, I didn't actually make a full section for him. I was just sending him a few clips here and there.
Yeah, that's I suppose that's so the push and pull element of it is other bits of life, and where you feel you've got to kind of, you know, empty your resources into to like kind of progress. And has that been a sort of constant tension for you, you know? And you just spoke about having not really made a full part for Sam, as it were, but I suppose that seems to be kind of a theme for you. It's been tricky to kind of nail down like a period where it's just like, you know, you're working on a part kind of thing with this like 100% intention. It's not hasn't happened, but it's seldom happened for you.
It was like a lead up to doing that was the booted. That was the kind of the booted section that I did with Tom Sharman. That was probably the closest thing to a full part I did until Sober.
With the Electric Wizard song.
Yeah. With the B-side Electric Wizard tune, which is
that like kind of not like doomy kind of Electric Wizard, but kind of
very
strange.
Very psychedelic and trippy synths, and with reverberating guitars and this weird piano.
Yeah, it's got creepy
piano running through it. And we were talking about doing something in black and white, and that brought up all these kind of horror references for me in cinema, and I thought that tune that sinister little piano would go well with me creeping out of alleyways and things like that. But
it's a dope section. There's a few things about it. So I suppose that kind of leads on to me thinking about your, like, where you were oriented geographically. And I suppose most of that section and quite a lot of your more recent skating, at least if not since moving to Hackney, has been pretty much proliferated out of Hackney and East London, essentially. You know, there's some really cool clips in Leytonstone, I think, in that part that you just spoken about with Tom there. Randomly, there's two discrepancies in that section, I believe. There is a trick of you jumping off of like a car park or something in Serbia, which I filmed. And then there's also another trick in there, which I'm sure is not in the UK. Is it the huck over the thing to topsoul? You know, it's like that's a dark side.
That's in Leyton.
Leyton as well. Okay,
one of the entricks. Yeah. It's the Serbia gap, that you filmed, which was in between Danny Atkinson's wedding. We managed to go out for a little skate with the groom, and you got a clip of me on
why use that
horrible stairwell.
Why use that clip in the context of all of this other stuff that you've got in East London? Was that important to you? That continuity, is that important to you in a skate section?
Well, actually, I mean, I feel that if you didn't know that was, I think it's like it looks London enough in terms of it was quite an industrial looking clip, and there was quite a few industrial locations.
Can't tell it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it could be. So I just kind of thought it's close enough to feel like it's in London to use. Also for that it felt like a good gap and a little bit of variation on what else was going on in the section. I mean, kind of
variations on a theme idea, but also the metrics of the trick itself gave it sufficient value to want to include it. It's like a big drop.
Yeah, and the textures within the image, I guess, as well. The kind of the building, this sort of dilapidated or half finished building with an exposed metal framework on the outside that kind of all looked pretty unfinished. And but again, I guess it felt a bit like an industrial area, just like Hackney Wick. It didn't feel too different to that kind of bit.
Is that so? Having a lot of your observable skate footage in and around that Hackney Wick, East London area, is that by way of you know, close proximity spots that you're able to travel to easily, like on bike, that are, you know, things that you've ridden past and have seen and have accumulated in your mind?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Sort
there's a lot of in that 10-year period, just exactly as you're saying. There's a kind of there's been a lot of development around here. There was the Olympic development, meant there was like a lot of old for new happening, lots of new buildings popping up, lots of building sites, but also lots of old buildings, all with loads of skate potential. And I did really like being in an area that wasn't residential, didn't have the same sort of suburban feel to it. I guess that just as an aesthetic, these kind of textures and areas and lots of graffiti and things on top of each other, and that kind of old brickwork and the canal networks as well. I really love all the canal networks, and there's an awful lot to skate around those areas, and I think with the kind of lifestyle aspect of living in a warehouse and having space for people to come and stay, and having you know, either yourself, Johnny or Kenny, of recent years to come and stay and work on videos and work on pieces with, has been like, there's been a kind of an immediate playground just from either rolling out the door, literally putting the skates on in the warehouse and rolling out the door, or going out on bikes, or just going for a walk and ending up somewhere and finding something to skate that way. But yeah, definitely in between journeys in and out of the city. And then I think like that's meant that geographically, I guess I do have more of I have had more of a network of things to skate that have been a little bit outside of the city, and that's meant that going in and skating in the city has felt
rejuvenated as well,
rejuvenated and much more spontaneous, in terms of not really knowing where I'm being taken, or meeting people and going from locations I do know, like you know, meeting spots, and going to places that other people know really well because they're in the city more, or whatever, they're skating in the city more. So actually kind of moved from skating in the city outside to another area of the city in a way.
So that skate part that Tom had made for the Booted, was that the Booted was a platform? It's kind of like a post Kingdom platform, but a pre, like, you know, the real explosion of social media, and there being kind of multiple platforms that house, you know, the lots of online users and interested people to skating and stuff like that.
Again, another brainchild of Ollie, of Adam Kohler. I think Kingdom was a lot. Ollie had a lot of input with Adam in Kingdom, and I think when that had kind of dissolved, then the Booted was this kind of a reimagining of that, and how to just try and streamline what Kingdom was doing and make it into something that had a slightly simpler aesthetic, and became just a portal to kind of create a bit of a template around how to get the images onto an online magazine. But yeah, as you said before, kind of social media explosion.
Was that part still, so that part was for the Booted, was it sort of in association, were you still sponsored at that time as such? So there was still conference, it was
an association, with the conference and Dirtbox, and so that was a post. There was kind of around that time as well, so I was sending clips to Adam, and he was assembling. So all the riders on the conference, I think like Nick, Dano, James, myself, they were all sending clips. Elliot, all sending clips through to Adam, and he was assembling these monthly edits, and that was kind of Kingdom time. Mm-hmm. and then it was about making kind of one-off videos with riders, and that was the Booted's thing, was to do these kind of collaborative projects, and they were like a product of the Booted thing. So that was, I think I had the first video on there. I think I was like
yours was the first,
the like launch video for the Booted.
Yeah, cool. It was a really cool edit.
And Tom did an amazing job putting it together, and quick cuts and weird cutaways, which is always like very much his style, and what kind of esque, kind of that.
Oh, his sort of footprint is definitely stamped on that edit, and I suppose he's been closely associated with East London and that kind of coverage of the area, often on his bike, often walking around, taking photographs. He's had a long-standing relationship with photography and moving image in that area specifically. So I suppose working with Tom was a sort of fairly straightforward process in getting out some good moves, I guess.
Yeah.
What would you say? So after that, because we're sort of saying you haven't had like as many parts as one would expect. To what extent is even having a part and working towards a part, and having a vision important to you? Like, to what extent?
Okay, so just to clarify, I think like it's maybe my ambition, or my idea of what the requirements of a sponsored rider would be to produce a certain amount of content at that time, and the kind of output of a rider didn't quite match with what I was doing. But that's okay. It's the journey that it went on is a good one, and I'm so lucky to. I feel so lucky to have been part of all of the things I've been part of, and put out the level of content that I've made, and to appreciate it in a sense that it was in a time when the ideas of producing content was changing anyway. And if I look back at the sort of content I've made in comparison to what's being made now, which is a lot more short form, immediate content, I think I was going through a transitory time of a whole network of people changing how they thought about what content was being delivered online. And my mind was still basing it in that moment a lot on things that had happened before. So I was thinking about parts in videos or DVDs and how people assembled a film, and there was a movement through sections like that had come from how Dave Payne assembled VG, and then those movements would come out of different ways of building up and heightening a section to a point to a release, and there being group sections and focuses on individuals. So all of those things were that kind of level of frustration and creative ambition and imagination were kind of all firing. And so I think there was a lot of stuff that I felt like at the time that I wanted to produce with Dirtbox. There's a frustration of not being able to make the Dirtbox video with Sam and Anthony and the guys and have this fully fledged, what was before the pinnacle of producing content. In that moment, it formed into something else. We were making shorter form stuff online and these promotional videos, and it didn't quite look like what had happened before. So that kind of caused quite a lot of frustration in me to feel like I was maybe underachieving or not quite outputting enough to warrant the kind of lucky gift I felt like I'd been given at that point. Do you know? So it's kind of like, felt like I was underachieving a little bit, I think, at that time. There was a sort of frustration with wanting to make it look a bit more like what had come before. But actually looking back, it was just part and parcel with what was happening at that time. And
yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I mean, I can certainly understand the idea of or there being a warped kind of idea of the past and having a feeling now about what was then, but not feeling then what you feel now, what you felt then. and that is a bit of a thought experiment when you reflect, because is it what it was? You know, but certainly feeling that you had more to give within the kind of framework of Dirtbox and what had come just before that, with a lot of epic skating, a lot of crazy hammers, and the sort of establishment, the establishment of a part for a rider almost being like the signature, being the ultimate expression, you know, of the rider, and all of the influential factors that make a rider up, the stuff that we've been sort of talking about. I'd imagine there being a sense of reticence about not having realized the maximum or whatever potential you had identified within the Dirtbox kind of period of your skating. And actually I would add to that by saying that, you know, I certainly, when I saw Dirtbox flourishing, and not even flourishing, emerging, you know, and the first things that I saw of Dirtbox, and then like you were riding for Dirtbox, I ain't gonna lie, I was like a little bit jealous, like, oh, Dirtbox is kind of the shit. Like, you know, I'm really, really excited to kind of see where that goes, because that's repping the UK in just this new sort of way, and it definitely started to kind of break down the what I thought was the outward perception of the UK scene, or the UK potential, in terms of like how we conceived and conceptualized and demonstrated skating. So there is that kind of self-examination, to the extent of like self-loathing, like I'm just not doing this good enough, you know, we're not doing this good enough, we're not meeting the heights of our counterparts in other countries. But then that sort of zeroes back into, well, what am I doing? You know, so I wanted to get into with you a little bit about parts, and so we'll get into that. And before we get into that, we'll just take a 2-minute break. You've been in front of the camera for, you know, most of your time skating, I think it's fair to say. From your earliest experience watching back footage of yourself to the most like involved, organized, and sort of visualization heavy you've been for a video part, could you expand on the discrepancy between these two polarities of those very early, like watching back footage, and this kind of idea of putting together a part, and what that it means to do that?
Yeah, so there's I guess there's that's it's a really good topic. There's I think the main thing it comes down to is the personal vision, and it comes down to authorship. So there's kind of you get this idea of like a sense of what someone else wants to achieve through the film that they're making. So if you're working with someone on making a film, they might have quite an idea of what that's going to look like and how that's going to feel. Then that's, I guess, the polarity comes from whether you're filming with someone, and as the skater, you have quite a clear vision on how you want that to look and feel. So there's a collaborative effort to try and creatively realize that vision together, or if someone's going to lead that creatively to produce something that looks a little bit more like the thing and how you think it might look if you put it together. Generally, it always comes out looking a bit different, which is that kind of that is very much part of a lot of the other stuff that I've been doing with my time when I'm not skating, is filmmaking and other sorts of filmmaking and storytelling and
script
writing, and that comes down to a lot of collaborative filmmaking. That comes down to big teams that produce a story together. And so I'd say that's the difference. That's the polarity between the two. If you go out, there's a sort of choreography that happens with skating. You go out and you choreograph a movement between the camera and the filmer, and it's a marrying of those two imaginations, of the person imagining the trick, how to use the obstacle, how to maneuver around the place, and also how the camera person, and usually they would become what in traditional filmmaking terms would be the director, because they're directing not just the camera, but they've already thought about what song they're going to cut it to. They're thinking about how those tricks are going to go together and edit. They might have an idea. They might not have an idea of how those things go together yet, but that all happens in the editing process. But they then very much are the director of that creative endeavor. So there's a sort of choreography that's happening around how the camera moves around the skater, how the skater moves around the spot, and how those two people are imagining how the trick's going to look. So they're coming at how they perceive the trick. The skater's coming at it from how the trick is perceived to look through the lens of the camera, and then how the person is capturing it. So there's all of that going on. Are you doing
that kind of process? Excuse me. Are you doing that kind of process? Like when we think back to the years where we had DV cameras, XM1s, and maybe even prior to triple chipped cameras, 3C CD cameras. I suppose I was interested in that first experience of watching yourself do a trick. So basically, that's do a move, that's a skate trick, whatever grind sort of thing it is, and that first okay, that's what it looks like kind of thing. And do we do this? Do we just have cameras? To the sort of process, which is quite a complicated and at times quite ambiguous creative process between two people.
There's more
how do you develop
more philosophizing of that now, I guess, for me, in terms of those arrangements and that kind of design, that unsaid design that's going on between the skater and the camera person. But the initial engagement probably comes as more of a maybe a more knee-jerk response to the sort of media and content that we were surrounded with at the time, and just it felt like the thing we should be doing is to pick up a camera, or at least for some of us to pick up a camera and document it, because there were skate videos. We were watching this content being made, and we were going, all right, we better respond to that. We better make some content ourselves.
And so there is a kind of looping back that occurs when we start thinking about this kind of thing, because the early, and I would say almost brainwash style indoctrinations that we were subject to with the skate videos were straight to the vein inputs of culture, of music culture, of aesthetic form, both bodily through the skate tricks, but then also vibratory kind of music sensations that you're getting as well. And you said about the kind of unsaid work that goes on. So somewhere along the lines with using cameras and watching the content, something happens there that evolves that process and makes this sort of vision more enhanced of yours as a skater?
Or maybe just as a developmental language that happens around that process, which I guess again is probably really relatable to other forms of artistry, dance, any other sort of choreographed thing where that you document it. I guess there's quite a few, but that involves a level of orchestrating how the camera moves around around the rider or around the protagonist or around. So there's that kind of, I guess that those things maybe come out of an interest in cinema and come out of an interest in creating other forms of film, and then that kind of then plays back into understanding how certain films were made, or being fascinated with how certain films are made, and then kind of that widens or gives context to how skate films are made and how those kind of movements happen. And
I mean, film has this way of, as you just sort of spoke about a second ago, driving feelings. Some of those feelings are totally relatable and understandable. Some of them maybe on the fringes a little bit more, but basically you're sort of taken through this narrative, probably if you're watching film, that drives feelings sometimes in an oppositional kind of way. Maybe, I mean, I think good films might do that.
Create conflict.
Would create conflict.
Yeah.
Is that something, so you're sort of saying that there are those elements that are relatable to skating? I certainly feel lots of high intense emotion when I watch skating. So how did it get to that?
It emotes that response, right? It emotes a certain response, and it's a very it's become I think during that quite intense time of making films, putting them out online, being part of productions in varying forms, there's that storytelling that is happening. There's a kind of visual narrative that is running through the productions, whether it be telling the story of a soul entity, or a group of people, and that
a soul skater.
A kind of there's that story, there's that narrative. It's more visual, it's more candid. It goes into a more documentary style, but now we are going into, there's a really high level of video production, VODs, creating of high level content that carries worth, and then so there's the sort of images becoming closer to what we think of as cinematic images. Cinema.
So hyper real, sort of crystal clear, hyper real, cinematic, 1,000 frames per second, slowed down, sort of,
like a hyper realistic, almost magical realism that happens with the kind of equipment that is people have, and that's come from maybe a maturity within skating itself, and the age bracket of skaters involved in it at a high level versus the careers that they're in or the jobs that they've taken on, meaning they have access to more a higher value kit and higher production value, and so then the image starts to change. I think there's always a kind of interest in producing high quality images, when I think about it, when I think about doing it, I think there's always a high level of production value. My mind was in a high level production value, but then I think there's a really high level production value to, say, Johnny's films.
Well, I was just going to say,
like, you know,
because we're
working
sort of
on mixing formats and storytelling and textures, and they tell a different sort of story. There's a different kind of meaning trapped within those images, and there's some, as you said, there's a documentary realism. So there's a how you identify with the themes or the people in that story.
If it's relatable,
if it's relatable, yeah. And I think there's definitely something within old cameras, or like older cameras, or 90s cameras from the 2000s that have a grittiness, that maybe there's an engaging, that I don't know, that maybe there's like a different level of engagement there that happens.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. So in terms of like the kind of hyper real, you know, 1,000 frames per second, you know, cinematic kind of aesthetic, I often think, and you've seen this in certain videos, that it's slowed down and made it so clear in terms of the physics of what's actually happening, like the definition of locking topside, for instance, or, you know, an image of somebody grinding, but then you can actually even see the wheel spinning at that time. So it's almost like you've got a magnifying glass, and you're actually sort of really seeing in crystal clarity the truth, if you will, of what's actually happening, at least in a kind of physical sense. But then the counter to that, which is what I think you were just sort of trying to say, is that with more degraded quality, where you haven't got that pixel clarity, for me at least, it leaves something to my imagination. It makes me have to fill in the clarity and make up the clarity in terms of the meaning. And
you have to do some of the work, and there's you have to do some of the work yourself to find meaning in that. But then that goes into a whole area of how you then edit it to music, or add candid moments and the spacing and all of these other things that you can do with editing, that you are creating the space for an audience to think for themselves, and to you know, kind of the ambiguity that happens within that gives people the room to draw their own conclusions over what they're watching.
That's really important. I think that's a massively important part to me, for watching a skate part, is I'm not presented with just all of the information about what skating is. I need some space to maneuver into, to kind of allow, you know, how my mind works and how I feel about those more fantastic, fringe, ambiguous ideas around what I think skating is, and a narrative that's taking place. And I think you do get that even more so with you know, projects using cameras like VX, Sony VX1000s and stuff like that. And actually, to add to that, even the sort of candid, on the ground journalistic style of film work, which Johnny Lee specializes in. For your most recent kind of full part, the video title almost takes itself from a candid kind of on the ground interaction, you know, which you can interpret that in various different ways, right? Like this chap who might, you know, is probably not in the best financial situation in the world, but the idea in and amongst his alcohol kind of and whatever else riddled position at that point in time, is just about violent revolution. You know, we got to kick them, fuck them, you know, this kind of idea.
And a kind of very,
and that's a very relatable sort of feeling at the moment. It's like, fuck everything, you know.
Very
we've got to take them down. We got to take them down.
Very, very anarchistic response to a theme that we know all too well at the moment, which is disparity, rich and poor. I think that something that we encounter a lot because we spend a lot of time on the streets is we've had a lot of experience with street life and what it is to live on the streets and what it is to, you know, on the fringes of it. I don't think any of us have really know what that's like, but we have an encounter with a lot of people that live on the streets quite regularly with skating, and to bring that into the conversation and to bring that into the story that we're telling at the moment, I'm kind of, I haven't really thought about violent revolution and the themes behind how Johnny cut that intro, and thinking at the time, you know, I'm living out of a bag at someone's house, you know, then there's kind of like, yeah, there's kind of a kind of wider story about me in that intro. There's a wider story about me kind of leaving somewhere and not, I mean, but also kind of being in and out of work and
sort of displaced.
Yeah, a bit of a displaced scenario, a bit of a transient, you know. And
so
I'm very lucky. I'm not in any way. I'm in a very lucky position. You know,
well, you can hold both things. Support. You can still feel like that.
I've got a support network around me. I'm really lucky in that sense. But there's a sense of what it is to be on the edge of being in a very different scenario, being in a situation like Jeremy that we met, that doesn't have that sort of support network and is relying on the bottle, but still understands that we've got to kick him. We've got that. Maybe that would create a slightly different scenario for him. You know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's something about still fighting. It's something about
and that plays back into those
sustaining a fight.
Yeah, and that goes back to those anti-establishment things that we've been talking about. I think there's a running theme with that kind of anti and like, you know, movements in culture that tie themselves in with skating and how it ends up looking and feeling sometimes. So,
and that part revolves again around your sort of geographical base. Although displaced somewhat, it's still a lot of it is in and around East London. You've got the Hackney Town Hall kind of thing. Yeah. The big nice sequences there in the summer.
Yeah. So that's literally, that is like, I think it was like 3 or 4 sessions with Johnny. That was like him. I get this right. I think he came and stayed with me. Then I think he came and stayed with me twice. Then we met up in the city once. There's a few clips in the city around Blackfriars.
Yes.
No, close to Barbican, like and then there's a weekend in Manchester where we went and stayed with Alex.
Yeah, the Manchester clips stick out so much just in terms of that red brickwork and mossy textured floor. You know, it was clearly a wet weekend.
It was a really wet weekend. We had a couple of hours between quite a lot of rain to go and skate. But we'd kind of walked around a lot and kind of seen some interesting stuff, and we're just hoping for a dry moment to go and skate. Yeah, so that was.
Do you like, you know, do you have in your mind, are you still searching, aiming, contemplating, assembling, putting together a kind of ultimate expression, you know, with this film interest, these music and textile interests, in this social life that you have led? You know, you're based in where you've been, you described your workplace and the relationships keeping you going, basically working and as a social you know, you've got all of this stuff that's formed your life so far. you know, are you still searching for something, you know, in terms of the kind of part idea, you know, like putting out something that is the undisputable, you know, expression of you as a skater, as a video? Is there something that you're looking for there, or
There's,
as you've described, it's kind of been, you've been doing you as you've been going along, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be?
I think there's maybe a, I think there's I'm sort of starting to accept that there's a certain magic in the unknown, and that there's not really, maybe there's the idea that I can have of what I want it to be, and then there's the actual thing that it becomes, and that process is the thing that I can do the most is enjoy the process from A to B, and actually find a way of including certain things in my life that mean that I enjoy that process. I want to keep skating forever. You know, I don't want to stop skating. I just want to keep skating. If it means that I can create images to go along with it, then that would be amazing as well. And there are certain things that I'd love to do at this time, when the world allows, to do certain things. There's some ideas I'm having around some projects that are yet again just on the doorstep, things that are kind of, you know, now that are on my doorstep at the moment, which still very much East London based. And there are also some wider themes and ideas over, I think, trying to distill some of those things down into images, and maybe that will manifest itself in print and maybe in other forms. I think there's a kind of combination of things that are coming out of old themes and new themes, stuff that I was working on in Manchester, that I kind of picked up and put down, that I'd really like to start doing again, some image making type based stuff that I'd like to do. And I'm kind of building a studio in Stratford at the moment to do that in amongst the other storytelling stuff that I'm going on. So there's like, but there's something to, there's always an inclusion of all the parts of my life, and how I then take them and express them through skating. I guess that's a good summary of what's going on at the moment. There's a lot of external stimulus that comes in and finds a way of coming out through skating. So there's at the moment, like dance, for example, has been really important during the lockdown. Like I dance around the house quite a lot, just to move, just to, and there's a kind of there's a German dance choreographer called Pina Bausch, and she does these quite amazing repetitive dance movements. And I think she's passed away, but the Pina Bausch dance company is a German company. They do a lot of stage production, so there's like a lot of videos on YouTube, and there's a lot of like repetitive movement. I think most of her theory on dance came out of like these kind of things that we do every day that become repetitive. The like things that we do without thinking,
Kind of brushing the teeth dance,
things like that, right? That then but then once you but yeah, I mean, for full attention, like put like brushing your teeth or combing your hair or putting on a jacket, or
when I dry my
making
hair,
a gesture.
when I dry my hair out the shower, I literally take my towel and headbang into it. That's what I do. That's how I
So-
still live vicariously through drying my hair in terms of not being able to go to shows anymore.
So it wouldn't be you'd probably see in a Pina Bausch thing there might be a sequence of 15 people on stage grabbing a towel and headbanging into it, and then moving around in a circle and then grabbing the towel and headbanging into it again.
Functional dancing.
These kind of like and making dramatizing our lives on stage, making dramatic movements out of what we do to heighten how we think about the things we do autonomously
On a mundane kind of level.
Yeah, on this sort of there's a mundaneness, autonomous, and then it's like, what are you thinking about when you're doing these mundane things? So then by heightening the movement and repeating it, does it somehow make a connection with how you think about the day?
I suppose it depends if you've I suppose it depends how like kind of
I don't know if that's how
responsive
I'm interpreting
you are to like your own internal, like how do you behave around the idea that you're taking these mundane aspects of your day and attributing this kind of I don't know, deeper experience or deeper meaning to it, I suppose. Because that could get overwhelming if you're just like every day over involved in that sort of way with mundane features of life, I suppose.
But then well, definitely, and then that could
be a problem.
That could be a problem for. But then
like
but
going down the stairs, just doing some fucking, just trip down the stairs. You're literally breaking your neck every day.
But maybe when you're doing autonomous actions in your day, what then are the thoughts that you have when you're just going about your daily processes at work or at home? And those daily interactions, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of thoughts that are happening. And somehow by taking those and making them into repetitive dance and giving it back to an audience, do you then get them to reevaluate the thoughts that they're having during those autonomous processes?
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if that's exactly what she's thinking about when she's doing the choreography.
I think I understand that,
but it really links with skating, and I find there's a really close relationship with repetitive movement in terms of trying a trick 100 times to get it right on camera, or whether it's just learning a trick to then performing it on camera to then choreographing a dance routine and delivering that on stage to an audience. It's like a superseded version of what we do on rollerblades.
Yeah,
it's like a kind of amazing thing.
No, I totally get that. I understand that. Several things there that you'd said, and I suppose like, you know, the drama of life, I guess, you know, is taken on board as either quite intense or mundane or somewhere in between. And we know where the intense moments are when something serious kind of goes down, and you know, or the mundane aspects of things where you're just doing things because it works and because you need to, and because you've developed a groove of having to do those things because they work and you need to, and that's just the way it is. And I suppose with skating, it's just this sort of, you know, hyper dramatization kind of thing, because of what is channeled through into that movement. There's so much, as we've discussed, that sort of ultimately ends up being channeled through in those movements. And I suppose when we were talking about video parts, it is about this sort of I mean, a good video part certainly takes you on a journey and has this narrative thread. So the narrative idea just being what we're doing in life, being alive, you know, on this journey, playing out the journey as a protagonist to yourself, you know, self. But I suppose the mundane practiced moves and the language of moves and how that occurs to you in different situations is interesting. I was going to ask you, I mean, there are some things that stick out in terms of your skill set and, you know, what your skill set is basically. And you've got a high jump or a huck, and you've got a pretty strong top sole like myself, for instance. You might lean on that quite a bit. So, you know, dark side TTP, stuff like that. But what does it mean to you to like trust or lean on a technique or a move? You know, how does that apply to exploring space? And I suppose just this idea that we were just talking about, to sort of implicitly trust a certain move, that's going to hold you pretty much no matter where.
Yeah, definitely. So entering into a new space and evaluating it and looking at how to maneuver around a space or how to engage with the space is grounded in what you naturally feel able to do within that. There's I guess then maybe a switch or natural scenario where it's like you're in a space, you're thinking about maneuvering around a space or trying to maneuver around a space, and you're going to, as you said, maybe lean into your what naturally feels more comfortable in that. So say a left-footed topsole for me, which would mean then approaching a ledge from the right or approaching an obstacle from the right. So then that's a stronger, for me, it's a stronger left foot topside spinning to the right. But I learned to skate I skated a lot of stuff on the right hand side to begin with. So I learned a lot of like right footed tricks and left footed tricks. So soles on my right foot, top soles on my left foot, because I just had a bench that went down this side of the path. So everything on that side got very natural. And it was like later on, I kind of started to learn how to do those switch, and it's like something clicked. I was like, well, I'm doing everything already. I've learned all the tricks going one way. I just need to go over there and do it that way. And then it's the same move. So there's a certain switch spins would maybe confuse me in how I would approach an area or get into a space, but definitely if I can see that, I think it was like talking to you about the void or like jumping over an obstacle, and maybe the idea of like wanting to jump. I mean, there's a whole kind of philosophy around jumping over something and propelling yourself over an obstacle and wanting to overcome something. And there's maybe a manifestation in wanting to overcome larger themes in my life, and that visually being portrayed in wanting to jump over things and jump out of certain scenarios.
Well, I'm thinking of your ender over the rail topsole in the Shaman Electric Wizard section, but the void idea, and that's super fascinating. And I suppose by having a move that you lean on, it enables you to really push the envelope in terms of when you can explore the void. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So whether there's an opening in the imagination to see the possibility of that, that you're physically able to explore that you have a physical ability, and it's manifested itself in an image based on where you are and what you've seen and the space that you're in, and you're going, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can put myself there in that position.
Will allow.
Yeah. And to push and lean onto that right foot, and to trust the back foot to come round on it, say a true top horn, and to just sit down and trust that position, and it's going to carry me until I lock onto the other side.
So is the void before you lock, and does that represent something inherently valuable in your pursuit of skating?
It does. I mean, I often find myself looking over the side of something to see if it's viable to get down there or not. You know, I'm always, as we said previous about kind of how much of the day is spent thinking about and seeing what movements could be made out there in the periphery, and sometimes I'm fully drawn away from what I'm doing, and I find myself staring over the side of something, and then go, shit, I need to get back to what I was doing, because I'm like, just and maybe snap a couple of photos of it.
Always snap photos. Never describe a spot. Just take a goddamn photo.
Yeah, take a couple of photos and then lose them in the stream of photos.
I love that idea, and I'd actually not really thought of it in that kind of term, in those sorts of terms, the sort of fascination with the void. And I'd often thought previously about the sort of state of being between knowing that what you've set out to achieve is about to be achieved, and mediating the sense of anxiety and the confrontation of that void and potential danger and all of the stakes that are at play. But it's that sort of fascination and playing with the void, and the void, the kind of, like the abyss idea, the chaos idea, is that kind of fundamental fear or operating backdrop, operating system that we have, that we're capable of.
Yeah, well, I could definitely draw a parallel between that and certain like anxieties and other and wanting to maybe find a way of expressing certain anxieties and pressures in other parts of life or other sorts of relationships, whether it be ones at home or at work, and somehow maybe there is a correlation between exploring the void and looking over the other side and wanting to make that into some sort of image to propel myself into another way of dealing with those relationships or those feelings, and wanting to move forward and over the blockage to the other side of what it is,
Yeah, well put. I mean, that's fascinating, and plenty of food for thought there. I mean, so much we could start going on about now. There's a couple more things that I'd say that we should cover, like, for right now, because we've been going at it for a while, actually, I think. There's a couple of more things.
I knew we can do that.
Yeah,
that's something that we could just sit and
it's fun
about this stuff, which is, I could do this all day.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I suppose I'd ask you, I think we've just sort of touched on a lot of really interesting aspects of what we're doing in life, with skating there along for the ride, or maybe it's the other way around. Just in terms of your peers and people whose work you found either personally inspirational, or that you've kept revisiting because there's a lot of value to that, a lot of meaning to that, would you say anything about people's work that you're interested in, or your peers and so on and so forth? Artists, skaters, styles, products, videos, I mean,
it's such a wide oh man, it's such like
did you have some things?
It's such an on the spot question.
You had some things jotted down. There's so much.
Yeah, there's so many things to talk about, I guess. Like you said, Negretti videos, that's like a whole that's a whole other conversation.
So Brandon
Negretti videos, I think, like, concepts and themes were so important to stuff. But I mean, going back earlier than that, I wanted to say, like, Poetry in Motion, the Philadelphia video, that was the one video I had on VHS for a long time. I didn't have any other VHSs. I just borrowed them from people. So that was one I'd actually bought and owned and watched a lot. And Selwyn Briggs was a really important section, I think, just because of the Andre tune, the Outcast tune, the way the presentation.
I Am YTA joint winner, Selwyn Briggs.
Yeah. And so that going back, and then I think like Mind Game Words and Accidental Machines. I
suppose everything Mind Game, really.
Everything, you know. Mind Game, but those two videos, for in terms of how they kind of, I'm talking more about like the kind of wider story or the wider visuals and themes that were that those videos conjured up, and the kind of things, and the videos like The Meantime, you know, like they're things that really stick out in my mind.
Yeah, we definitely touched on that a little bit, and I do think you know, in terms of, you know, analyzing, you know, and reflecting on Brandon Negret's work and all of the themes that come from that, super important to skating, and has given rise to a lot of different chaps like yourself or me, you know, just venturing off even further into the skate culture and wanting to be invested in it. And yeah, I'd definitely say Negret's a massive part of that. Are there any skaters' work particularly that you found influential or that just hold a particular place in your mind?
I mean, I'd probably say like Alex's work is really important in terms of he's working with other filmmakers and a lot of other filmmakers, but that having made very kind of quite major creative decisions over how they're going to be presented and how he wants to present himself and how he's always held himself. Yeah, I mean that's there's a few people that have done that through their career and still do. This season, but he definitely stands out as one person that just continually
absolute hero.
Continually pushes the bracket of what's possible in
terms of image as well.
Not just in image making. You know,
he's our age. He's a peer.
Yeah. So that's kind of peer group level, I guess. Like, I mean, yeah, going back to. I say like people that I kind of, I guess, images that come up in my mind quite often go back to, like, I say, like, again, Philly videos, but Jeff Fredericks.
Oh my god.
And True Top Pawns. and Jeff Fredericks is just, it's kind of like, yeah, there's a lot in that for me, I think. And
Jeff Fredericks has got to be mentioned because he actually lived in London for about a year or so and was actually part of our skate group, which is one of the more, you know, left field sort of unexpected things to, you know, we've been talking about people materializing and you know, that just being like a funny thing in skating where somebody that you either have seen in print or whatever just materializing at your doorstep or something. But having Jeff Fredericks part of our crew was definitely like super unexpected. And what's even funnier is, you know, since then all of the things that have been sort of publicized about him, and then, you know, I'm watching vids now of Jeff absolutely slaying it, and then he's like coming up on my social media and shit just being like, oh, sick, you know. And it's just like, you know, it's just a funny sort of
Yeah,
world, you know,
it is.
that where these people sort of come and go, dissipate and materialize, incarnations of themselves.
Mm.
And you know, he is looking really sharp, and he, you know, yeah, clearly skating never left him.
No.
That's for sure.
So that was that, definitely, yeah, definitely, like that kind of
Do you like
I
TTPs
mean,
because of Jeff Frederick? That's your thing, why you do TTP so much?
well, I, d- I don't know if it's that. I think it's maybe an appreciation of true topside tricks in London. I think like you've always had a strong true topside, and wanted to like pursue that movement uh, along with you somewhat.
Or get the
And
shin guards on.
yeah, and I quite early on realized that felt like sunny days, and that whole body position just felt really natural,
Mm.
and so would generally end up in a session where a length of time was spent getting in that position, and the getting in that position and trying to get full cab into it, or to, you know, spin in and out of it, and to, you know, so it's like just it's always just been a reoccurring shape that just felt
Yeah.
natural. So then I guess I'm drawn to that image when I see other people doing it well. But yeah, I was just thinking, but then
Oh
I
yeah,
guess
look,
like, yeah, I mean, then there's, yeah, I kind of get lost. It's like a barrage. I don't even know where to start. It's like I'd spend so much time. I spend quite a lot of time looking at skating on Instagram now. Like it's silly. It's silly how much time I spend looking at skating on Instagram. I mean, it's not silly. It's great, and I'm really thankful that I have it actually, especially at the
because you'll
moment.
share quite a lot of content, won't you? You'll use the story Instagram to share a lot of content, and so that's something that is sort of a mainstay of the social media functioning, is to kind of post yourself, but also to share the work of others and spread the word, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I don't share that much of my own content on Instagram. I'm doing it a little bit more at the moment, but I definitely am sharing a lot more of other people's content on my story, because it feels like a good kind of movement to watch something and then show the appreciation of just sharing it on the story and making sure some other people are seeing it as well. And that probably speaks more clearly to what my influences are. So I guess if you just have a look
Yeah,
on my story from time to time, you'll see
that answers the
exactly.
question
Exactly.
roundly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a quick way of getting some classy skating right to your, you know, your eye shot. I mean, you've got your feed, but
Yeah.
almost if you've got people you trust who, you know, share cool stuff, that's a way of aggregating the content, the really good content, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't, you know, I follow enough people on Instagram. I mean, the fucking thing's just like, you know, I've got a lot of content to sift through, so it is quite difficult to kind of center in on anybody, you know, in particular. And I suppose that's testament to just how deep the annals go when it comes to the amount of work that's been completed, achieved, laid down, you know, crystallized in video on YouTube, and so on and so forth. And that's a really excellent place for us to be. So
I think just for me it's a very broad spectrum of absorbing lots of different sorts of skating and lots of different sorts of images. There are certain themes around what but I find that I'm I'm more open to a broader spectrum of, and not so limited to one certain sort of aesthetic or look or music, or it's kind of a wider appreciation of lots of different forms and seeing the correlation between them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I suppose it's the idea of finding a relative amount of meaning and value in a discipline of skating that has departed from conventional aggressive, like for instance some of the skating that Joey Todd or Leon and you know that emanates from Canada, you know, the wizard forms, wizard skating, big wheel skating. I mean, there are other practitioners that do some pretty cool stuff as well, but just to kind of center in on those guys and what they do, I certainly get a whole lot of value from those sorts of movements, and you know that spurred me on to getting the equipment and to being interested in the language of it all, and conceptualizing my own skating and expression in that way where I can, where I want to.
Yeah,
you know, and
definitely
that's
with the big wheel skating has been really important, and playing around with Aeons for a few years and having 72 mil Aeon setups, and along with mixed skating on 60 mil setups, and then having some 100 mil wizard skates, it's definitely really broadened the spectrum of what it is to go out and move, and what sort of movements I'm making. There's a kind of also, as I said, I'm really at the moment interested in dance, and how there's some amazing figure skater, ice skaters that do crossover.
I saw you share some of that stuff on your story, some more contemporary figure skating and ice skating.
Yeah, like a mix of contemporary dance and figure skating, which I think is super interesting. And I just feel like there's a whole world of exploration between the kind of the big wheels movement in Canada and what those guys are doing, and kind of contemporary dance and aggressive skating. I think that would be a super interesting exploration of movement, and even these kind of these choreographed stage productions, and how those movements play out on stage, and finding those repetitions in between grinds, or I think that could be a whole
I suppose
another area of play, which I'd love to explore.
Playfulness and introducing non-conventional movements in between the formal grind tricks, and we've seen a lot of that sort of play happening, and you know, a focus on what's happening with 8 wheels down rockered, and the way in which that allows the hips and the lower body to move, and actually creates new rhythms and I suppose new meanings from the experience of skating, and that translates quite nicely in video. You know, it really does, and it's no wonder why so many people are kind of having this exponential, you know, dilemma, I guess, about what products and how to skate and what to skate. What even I was thinking of a second ago is almost like with each millimeter and rockering setup of sized wheel, there's this kind of like, you know, each has its own like solar system of meaning and language and feel, and that is really, that speaks to the sort of infinite subjective quality of skating as well, whether it's a flat profile or elliptical, whether it's, you know, all of that stuff, which kind of goes over my head for the most part. But you know, I am very concerned with the feeling that comes up through the equipment, and you know what then that conveys as part of my overall concept of life. And I think, you know, definitely these sorts of discussions are really helpful in kind of putting some of those things out there. I mean, with that being said, I'd probably say let's do this again in the not too distant future. I feel like there are some other things that we should probably cover that we may not have touched on, and I think we probably touched on quite a lot. I mean, I don't know how long we're into this podcast we are now, but it's a good few hours. And yeah, just like thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you for making a platform
cool
to do it on. Yeah, it's really cool. It's so good to do this, and I'd love to do it more.
We'll do it.